The first-person shooter genre has been around ever since the 70s and 80s with games like Maze War and Battlezone. While they were shooting games that the player would play using a first-person perspective, the first true FPS was created in the early 90s with Wolfenstein 3D. Dubbed the grandfather of first-person shooters, Wolfenstein helped lay the foundation of what the FPS genre would be moving forward. However, the company behind Wolfenstein 3D, id Software, were looking towards greener pastures, and in 1993 they unleashed Doom to the world. Doom took Wolfenstein's basic shooting mechanics and ran with it, and with that, it created something truly special. Nazi soldiers were replaced with demons from hell. The World War II backdrop was abolished in place of an entirely original story involving failed scientific experiments and a lone space marine trying to survive the demon horde. Instead of 4 weapons, Doom had 7. Instead of only a couple of enemy variants, Doom had several types of demons that the player had to deal with. Instead of the basic level infrastructure that Wolfenstein 3D presented, Doom's map layouts featured unseen before verticality, elaborate traps and monster closets, new ways of triggering specific cues, and this in turn provided the developers with more ways to engage the player. id Software told Computer Gaming World that the game would be Wolfenstein times a million, and they were spot on with that line. Doom's legacy and impact on the gaming landscape can still be felt to this day, with many people stating that even all of these years later, that it's the best first-person shooter game of all time. And I'm one of them. This is the genius of Doom. Now, I fucking love the Doom franchise, but throughout this 10-part retrospective I'm planning on doing, I will also be critical of each game. This project will contain a lot of gushing and praise for Doom, because I am a super fan, but I will also critique some parts of the Doom games later on, but again, that's just a byproduct of me loving the games to death. Anyway, I briefly covered the several technical innovations that spawned from Doom that Wolfenstein ultimately lacked. What makes Doom a genius game though, and why is it so replayable? Some fans might turn to the modding community and the sheer amount of support they gave Doom over the years. I mean, there's custom mod files, different mods and texture packs to play with, and more. The Doom modding community has been incredible for the longest time, but I don't believe that this is the driving factor as to why the gameplay has an everlasting quality to it. The original Doom is simple. The gunplay, the key collecting, and everything in between is rather simple, and that's what makes it timeless. Some would argue that the gameplay in Doom is too simplistic, but I think that 1. There is a bit more nuance to the weapon's functionality and meta than you may think, and 2. The rather straightforward shooting mechanics is the game's greatest asset. I will elaborate on point number 1 in a later video, so let's focus on why the gameplay can be quite varied for new players and veterans. If a newcomer plays Doom for the first time, they will most likely not hold shift to run and stick to the average walking speed, which is slow as fuck. They might peek behind cover to avoid the several hit-scan enemies all over E1M1, and they'll probably also eat some imp fireballs. While I believe the game was obviously more intended to be played at a faster pace, with the player running and strafing around, the game isn't built solely upon speedy combats. Doom is much more simple than that, and due to its simplicity, it opens up many ways to play the game. With the Plutonia Experiment, which is one of the megawads bundled in Final Doom, taking your time is basically a requirement in some sections, and the game punishes you for acting too cocky and flying ahead. Going back to the original Doom, you can go through each level carefully by peeking behind cover, staying cautious, savouring health pickups, and play it more like an action horror game. I mean, there are many monster closets in Doom where the lights would dim and you would be trapped trapped in a room with demons to deal with in the dark. That closet would be much more frightening when you are already taking it slow and not running through the level. Doom's combat is simple, so it can be played in a number of different styles. The very casual Doom player would pace themselves before blasting ahead through a level, while the more veteran players have auto-run enabled, are strafing left and right, and all of a sudden it becomes an entirely new experience. You feel like a badass when you're dancing through imp and cacodemon fireballs, when you blow up an entire room of monsters within seconds using a rocket launcher, when you breeze through a mission in a matter of seconds, etc. All of these feel very rewarding, and it's very enjoyable blasting through Doom levels at a breakneck pace. So there are two combat styles in Doom that the player can play around with. Both of them offer up a unique experience, and that's what makes Doom genius. When people design maps for classic Doom, they can create a map either around making the player take their time, or making them blow through a level. I love that, and the seemingly primitive nature of Doom's gunplay makes it so that modders and map designers can get even more creative with how they structure their levels. I do find it fascinating how id Software has varied up their properties over the years. Of course, the shining example of an id franchise having an identity crisis is with Quake, but Doom was in a similar boat for a bit. Regardless, the original Doom accommodates all types of players with its gameplay, and I think that's part of the reason why the question, what is Doom, can be answered differently depending on the person. Doom is a horror game. Kinda. If you played Doom back in the 90s as a kid and your memories of it consist of the stretched out demonic faces and how scary the lighting was, then yeah, it's no wonder why you came to that conclusion. Doom is a power fantasy. Kinda. If you watch an expert Doom player breeze through each stage as they're weapon switching, strafing around fireballs, and doing all of these badass activities, then yes, you will no doubt believe that the game is trying to be one. Doom is a puzzle game. Kinda. Of course, there's two ways to think about that last comment. You can either consider Doom a combat puzzle or a maze puzzle, and both are legitimate. There are points where the player feels like a rat in a maze trying to find the exit switch, and there are most certainly combat encounters that you need to prepare for and think about which weapon to use. And that's what I'm trying to get at here. Over the years, Doom has been labelled as many things by different people, and the brilliance of it all is, they're all kinda right. After Doom 1 and 2, there was Final Doom, that consisted of TNT Evolution and the formerly mentioned Plutonia Experiment. While both TNT and Plutonia were just Doom 2 megawads, most of their maps are still worth playing. With Plutonia specifically, I usually try to take my time with it and act cautiously around keycards and important items, because you'll just know there'll be a trap after you collect them. Also, in the first level for example, ammo is scarce, so it's important to make every shot count. You really need to take your time to plan out your attack in that case, and that's what I'm saying. Doom can promote different types of play, depending on the map and player of course. As we fast forward to 2004, id Software released Doom 3 to a mixed reception. Some people loved the game and other people thought that it leaned too much into survival horror, which is one term I disagree with in association with Doom 3. This game is not necessarily survival horror, but more so a horror action game or a first-person shooter with horror elements. Either way, Doom 3 did rely on more slow-paced gameplay than its predecessors, but the original Doom can be just as slow-paced. I've seen many people play Doom like an action horror game, as they creep around walls and snipe enemies from afar. Doom 1 and its surrounding WODs are special because of the different styles of play it can serve up. Even going back to the Ultimate Doom, in Episode 4 Mission 1, you have to peek around cover when the shotgunners are coming after you. That's mostly because you don't have any armor or additional health, and that first level of Viflesh consumed can fuck you up if you don't manage your resources properly. Doom 3 offers a kind of similar experience as it's much more slow paced. But on the other side of the coin, Doom 64 was released as a new entry in the Doom franchise, but everyone for the longest time just thought it was an N64 port of the original game. In reality, Doom 64 is a brand new take on the Doom formula, and instead of the monsters being the ultimate threat to the player, it was the maps themselves. Doom has had environmental hazards before, but Doom 64's levels felt like they were out to personally get at you and trip you up. The game just had a tendency to fuck with you by providing more stage obstacles than previous Doom games. I mean, early on, there's a puzzle where you have to reach the blue key, and when you try and collect it, the key just moves spots. Things like that would annoy me in a good way, and it made me want to figure out what the puzzle was for each level and how to avoid the constant environmental dangers. Doom 64 is one of those games you either love or hate, and I'm in the camp of people who simply enjoy it for what it is. When id Software rebooted the Doom franchise with Doom 2016, the developers hinged on creating a fast push-forward combat loop in the game. They created arenas where the player would run around and fuck up demons, and I believe they mostly nailed the Doom experience. An issue I did have with the reboot that they did rectify in Doom Eternal was the lack of enemy contact outside of the main arenas. I hope id Software continues to add more things like this where enemies are placed in non-arena zones. It helps freshen up the gameplay and it gives the player some choice on how to handle the demons. Speaking of Doom Eternal, I did want to mention some of the genius aspects of that game, especially when it comes to the weapons and how they can be used. I've seen many people experiment in Doom Eternal with various gun combinations, and it's mind-blowing to see how effective some methods are. People have found creative ways to chain certain gun attacks together to dispose of enemies quickly, or in general just to play more efficiently. To name one example, I used to think that the microwave mod for the plasma rifle was kinda useless. Yes, you can use it to zap demons and make them explode, but I never found a great place to use the mod and opted for the heat blast instead, until I found this video. Under the Mayo is creating fantastic Doom Eternal videos, and he previously made one on a great method on using the microwave beam. Instead of standing in one spot trying to charge up the microwave beam so that the demon will explode, you can use it more as a stun lock device to give yourself a breather in combat. The way that Doom Eternal allows the player to mix and match different weapon combinations and find your own ways of making each gun mod work for your playstyle is amazing, and I hope this concept gets expanded upon in later Doom entries. It's simply fantastic. By the way, I'm aware that this video was initially about the genius of the original Doom, and hopefully I've explained why the simple combat has made the game timeless, but I also wanted to praise what id's doing with the property today. When the id Software team made Doom back in the 90s, it felt like the game was being created by passionate guys who just loved pop culture, and that spirit has been carried on with id today. People like Marty Stratton and Hugo Martin are single-handedly keeping the attitude of id Software alive, as they seem like huge pop culture nerds, and pop culture is directly fueling these new Doom games. Just like how the Cacodemon was ripped straight from this Dungeons & Dragons manual for the original game, they literally have collectible action figures in Doom Eternal. I love how the Doom franchise is inherently inspired by pop culture, and that's still going on today. Doom is an interesting beast, because while it can be scary and atmospheric, it also has a sense of humor about itself. Nothing is taken overly seriously, and even in Doom 3, there's an arcade machine called Super Turkey Puncher for fuck's sake. Now that I've given a not-so-brief overview of the Doom series, while also examining what makes classic Doom's gameplay so special to me, I wanted to switch gears and discuss the most subjective aspect about the original game: its level design. Every Doom fan has an opinion on what makes a good level. Every fan has a preference and a disdain for certain maps, and there's been so much discussion online about the best and worst maps in the classic Doom franchise. For me, Doom 1 is my favourite game in the series. I think it has the most consistent level design, and I really want to dissect each of its maps. Doom's first episode, titled Knee Deep in the Dead, is probably the most important set of maps in the first first-person shooter genre. These 9 levels made up the shareware release of Doom, and what can I really say about them that hasn't already been said? Doom's very first level is one of the most iconic maps in any game, and for good reason. E1M1 Hangar was designed by John Romero, as was most of Knee Deep in the Dead, and it was actually the last map to be created. Romero has explained that all of Doom's designers got naturally better at map making as they went on with development, and he wanted the first level to be the best, so that's why it was made last. And if you, yourself, picked Hangar as the greatest level in the game, I definitely can't disagree. Hangar follows a simple horseshoe design where the level loops around, and it also follows each one of John Romero's design principles. For instance, Romero likes to have outside areas in his maps, but he makes sure that everything you can see through a window you can access, and that is hinted in E1M1 by the Mega Armor sitting in the toxic pool. On Ultra Violence, you can access the shotgun in the first few seconds thanks to these zombies, and then you can just blow through the rest of the map. Good stuff. E1M1 is brilliant, you all know that, and it's been talked about to death. So let's go on to the other levels in episode 1. Knee Deep in the Dead is probably the most perfect episode in any 90s first-person shooter game. The only level that I can actually criticize is E1M8's Phobos Anomaly, and that's only because on higher difficulties, the most challenging part about the map is the Pinky Demons getting in your way instead of the Barons of Hell. Also, I think this star shape is kinda weird, and while it's not a terrible boss map, it's certainly very iconic, it's not fantastic either. Apart from E1M8, Episode 1 is pitch perfect, and the level designs are super consistent. E1M2 opens things up a bit and introduces the red key to the player. I love how you're immediately faced with options with how to maneuver through the stage. You can take the lifts up first to grab the health and ammo, you can check out and collect the green armor first, or you can go up these stairs in order to grab the red key. Here you can see John Romero's obsession again with adding windows to look at the outside area so that you can wonder how the fuck you're getting out there when you first play. E1M3 is another classic, especially with the part where you grab the blue key, the room turns almost pitch black, and you hear a closet full of imps open up. Oh, and the Pinky Demons make their first appearance in this level, and they make their presence known from the jump by rushing towards the player. There are so many great novelties and set pieces in this episode, and the more and more I play Knee Deep in the Dead, the more I appreciate the little details and what makes it so perfect. My personal favourite levels in episode 1 include Central Processing, Phobos Lab, and Command Control, but in all honesty, they are all brilliantly designed. The pacing of Knee Deep in the Dead has got to be mentioned as well, since if you take one out of these 9 maps out, the synergy between each of them falls apart. As Doom continues with episodes 2 and 3, the maps get a bit more spotty, but they are still mostly a joy to play. From E2M1, Deimos Anomaly, to E2M5, Command Center, the level design remains solid and they start to incorporate more demonic imagery. In episode 1, the Hell architecture was only presented to you in secret areas, which I think was a very cool idea and it makes exploring even more rewarding. But then, episode 2 blows the doors open and greets you with an upside down cross in the first level. I know that E2M2 containment area gets a lot of shit, but I never really found it to be that confusing or frustrating to figure out where to go. My issues with episode 2 only lie with E2M6, Halls of the Damned, E2M7, Spawning Vat, and how can we forget, the worst secret map in any Doom game, E2M9, Fortress of Mystery. E2M6 can be a pain in the arse with the dark sections, but at the same time, I love the fake exit switch. Even though I'm not a huge fan of Halls of the Damned, I can still admit that the fake exit is ingenious. E2M7 looks a little rough around the edges, and I believe that's due to how long this map was in development. If I recall correctly, E2M7, Spawning Vats, was one of the first levels to be designed, and it was worked on since Doom's alpha stage. So with that said, it's no wonder why it doesn't seem quite as appealing as the others. Whenever you come across a demonic room in spawning vats, it looks very nice and fun to go through, but the same can't be said for these blue tech base areas that I'm not really a fan of. Unfortunately, the secret map of episode 2, Fortress of Mystery, is one of my lesser favourite Doom maps. However, it was the first ever map designed with infighting in mind, so I do have to pay it a lot of respect. In fact, the map's designer, Sandy Peterson, should be highly praised for his efforts working on Doom 1 and 2, but I'll discuss that more in depth in a later video. The general idea of E2M9 is that you're supposed to be like, how the fuck am I going to kill all of these barons and cacodemons? And then you just let them infight to solve the problem. This idea works in theory, but up to this point in episode 2, you're already equipped with plenty of ammo and guns to take care of everyone. If Fortress of Mystery was accessed through E2M1, that would have made much more sense with infighting being the intended solution, and also the benefit for finishing the secret level would have been a lot greater, since you would enter E2M2 with every gun but the BFG. You'll be fully equipped at that point to deal with the challenges ahead, but with the way that E2M9 is found in E2M5, I find Fortress of Mystery to be quite perplexing, but I guess that fits the map name. At least E2M8 makes up for it with the first Cyberdemon encounter in Doom history. I love the dead barons on the walls, and this is a great, simple arena. It taking actual religious concepts like the Tower of Babel and shoving them into Doom is also really cool to see, and of course how can you forget the intermission screens, how you see the tower being built over time. If you do have some plasma left over, just use that to kill the Cyberdemon. Don't bother with the rocket launcher duel with all of them lost souls around. And that concludes episode 2. Although The Shores of Hell is pretty damn good, I think I prefer episode 3, Inferno, more, just because they fully embrace the hell aesthetic. If I had to think more objectively though, they are probably on par with one another. Either way, E3M1 Hell's Keep is fucking awesome, and it's the perfect entry into Hell. I mean, you start out by touching a switch in the shape of an eye. Now that is demonic. The rest of the level is surprisingly tight with ammo, and I definitely recommend getting all of its secrets to have an easier time with E3M2, Slough of Despair. Now, I've seen a ton of people shit all over Slough of Despair, and while it isn't groundbreaking compared to the other Hell levels in the game, I think it's still decent enough. The most common criticism of E3M2 is that it's too tight, too closed in, and it's a little tough to maneuver through, but to me, that's a part of its charm. We're in episode 3, located in Hell, and I feel like some levels should be daunting and claustrophobic in parts. We're on the monster's turf, and the player is on foreign soil, so yeah, making a map like Slough of Despair works in that sense, but only once in a while. Again, I'm not trying to claim it's the most well-designed level in the world, but I think it gets way too much of a bashing. E3M3 Pandemonium is up next, and it's another fine level, along with E3M4 House of Pain. E3M3 is where the player can obtain the BFG, and I kinda like how it's just sitting in this corner chilling, not bringing any attention to itself. As for House of Pain, I know that a common complaint with this map is this damaging floor with a line of health pickups to compensate, and even though it is kinda dumb, it's also not that offensive to me. House of Pain has much more awesome set pieces and interesting rooms than it has flaws. I mean, just take this room with the weird tentacles and pillars, or the next room over with the red ceilings and blood-leaking mouths as evidence. Inferno is a rather strong episode until we get up to E3M5, Unholy Cathedral. This level can just fuck off with its teleport heavy bullshit. It's been a decade since I started playing Doom and I still can't be asked figuring out exactly which teleporter goes where. I know where the blue key is, so I get that and rush to the exit. It's a shame because Unholy Cathedral contrasts heavily with E3M6, Mount Erebus, which is my all-time favourite map in the game. The open-ended level design, the island-based approach, the brilliant enemy placement, the texture and building layouts, everything about this map is fantastic. If I had to pick one issue with Mount Erebus, I would say that for first time players, it might be a little confusing on where to go after collecting the blue key, but that's my only real complaints. Throughout the course of episode 3, you're picking up rocket launcher ammo and you don't have many open spaces to fully use it. That is, until Mount Erebus. Now you can finally let those rockets go, and it feels nice to be in a wide outdoor arena blasting everything with your gun. If you take the secret exit to E3M9, Warrens, you will find yourself in a remixed version of E3M1, and this is undoubtedly the best secret map in the game. The way that the level initially tricks you and how it might almost piss you off that you're back at E3M1 is amazing, and while it is a novel idea, it is still a very fun level to play. Limbo is the penultimate level of the original game, and it's fine. It might be very annoying for first time Doom players due to the massive key hunt, and I'd imagine that was the intention, but Limbo is still a bit disappointing as the second to final map. I wish E3M7 was an extension of Mount Erebus and we just explored more hellish islands and cityscapes, instead of being trapped indoors doing switch and teleport puzzles. On its own though, Limbo is just okay, and even if it is kind of a letdown, I don't dislike it as much as some people might. That being said, Limbo doesn't hold a candle to being the most disappointing Doom level compared to E3M8. Dis. Here is the final boss of the entire game, and you can destroy it in 2 to 3 quick BFG shots. There's no build up to the Spider Mastermind, there's only a couple of demons to cut down besides it, and this level puts a bad taste in your mouth. Doom begins excellent and ends poorly, but at least we have Thy Flesh Consumed to make up for it. Hell Beneath was created by American McGee, and this is touted as one of the hardest levels in Doom history. This map can be punishing, and I absolutely love it. The way that you have to peek around corners, as I've said, to pick off his shotgunners in the beginning is great, and the limited health pickups makes this an even more challenging map. There's only a few health vials in this entire level, so you better not waste them. I know that many players have trouble with the teleporting enemies when going inside the red key room, but to lessen some of the difficulty, I usually hug this wall before going inside to trigger most of the monsters out, and then kill them from this area instead of the tight interior. At least when you're fighting them from the outside, you have more room to maneuver, and it makes things a little easier. I've heard that people also have trouble with the monsters and how they constantly teleport to a different location, making them hard to kill. Well, the teleport destinations are marked with the pools of blood on the ground, so that should help with determining where they will disappear to next. Even with those tricks, Hell Beneath is still a tough fucking level, but I find it so enjoyable to play, and it's one of the best maps that Thy Flesh Consumed has to offer. E4M2, Perfect Hatred, is another iconic Doom map, and it's another one that can be insanely difficult. Designed by John Romero in 6 hours, this might be my personal favourite episode 4 level. Even though it might be overwhelming, there are a ton of shortcuts and little tricks to help you get past it. For starters, when you raise this platform up, immediately dash towards it and you will end up on top of it. Then you rush to the plasma rifle and fuck up the Baron guarding it at point blank range. This makes it much easier to handle the group of Barons on the other side of the room, as you have more space to maneuver and more plasma ammo to use. Another important tip is to perform the BFG grab when you're in the secret area. In order to get this BFG the normal way, you need to telefrag the Cyber Demon, and that's only an option when you're basically done with the level. So yeah, my advice is to get the BFG early and use it on whatever you need to get by. The difficulty of the map aside, I think the architecture and the way that lava surrounds the entire stage looks great. It reminds me of Sigil, which also has rather complicated levels. I cannot believe that Romero designed this in only 6 hours. It seems too intricate for that to be the case, but either way, E4M2 is near perfection. Thy Flesh Consumed softens up when you get to E4M3, Sever the Wicked, and although the maps going forward are not as iconic as Hell Beneath or Perfect Hatred, they are still quality levels in their own rights. I love the orange coloured skybox and wooden texture combo, and there are just hordes of fucking monsters in this map. It feels so good mowing down a large group of hit-scanning enemies with rockets, the plasma rifle, or the chain gun, whatever. Like I said before, this level might seem like a departure from the first two levels in episode 4, but as a standalone thing, it works quite well and is nicely designed. E4M4 might be the easiest map of thy flesh consumed, and while it's not bad at all, it is a little inconsistent from the first 3 levels with its difficulty. The episode goes from brutal, then more brutal, then it gets a little easier, then the difficulty plummets and becomes a cakewalk with E4M4 and even E4M5. Speaking of which, E4M5, They Will Repent, is probably the weakest entry in the episode. I think it looks kinda bland compared to the rest of Thy Flesh Consumed, and it's one level I try to finish as quickly as possible to get to E4M6, Against the Wickedly. E4M6 shares many similarities with Perfect Hatred, as they are both intricate with many obstacles and steps to finish them. Oh, and the Cyber Demon makes a return as well, and is much tougher than an E4M2. I usually try to take him down in the lava below using a radiation suit, rather than trying to blast him at point blank range. E4M7, and Hell Followed, is the penultimate map of the episode. Rest in peace, John Anderson. I'll be talking more about this guy later on when I cover the Doom 2 master levels, but nevertheless, he was an extremely talented map maker, and E4M7 is no exception to this. Tight action pieces, a rather small, compact design, very solid monster placement, and no real complaints from me about E4M7. The final level of Thy Flesh Consumed is pretty damn good, and it makes up for episode 3's lackluster conclusion. There is some great build-up with an army of hit scanners to lay waste to, a group of barons to take care of, and plenty of plasma/BFG ammo to deal it with. Even though the actual Spider Mastermind encounter is nothing too special, the map built him up appropriately and gave you ample weaponry and power-ups to take him out. Those were pretty much all of the levels I wanted to talk about in the Ultimate Doom, and I love most of them. Doom 1 is my favourite game in the franchise, and I think there are only 2 maps that I can say are downright bad. The original Doom has an extremely consistent map set, and blew the doors off for first-person shooter games to follow. From the combat mechanics and the technical leaps it had over Wolfenstein 3D, to its excellent sense of humour, blending of sci-fi and horror, and the superb level design, these are all of the traits that make up the genius of Doom. Doom 2 is a safe sequel that doesn't break up the Doom formula very much, but at the same time, it is also ambitious with its more novel set pieces, larger map designs, and higher enemy counts. The shooting mechanics of Doom 2 are exactly the same as its predecessor, with the only additions being the super shotgun and a handful of new enemies. Each new demon that was introduced in Doom 2 has altered the series radically, and I couldn't see a world without the Revenant or Archvile in a Doom game. That all being said, Doom 2 doesn't fix what isn't broken, but the level design has been a constant point of criticism for many people, including myself unfortunately. To be fair, Doom 2 was developed in only 10 months, and most of the maps were designed by one person, Sandy Peterson. I talked about him before in my last video, and he was responsible for creating 17 out of the 32 levels for the game. He was the workhorse for Doom 1 and Doom 2, and either way you slice it, he worked hard on his maps and he really grafted to impress id Software. I would even go so far as to say that Sandy Peterson was the MVP of Doom 2. Many fans respect mappers like John Romero, American McGee, the Casale brothers, and for good reason. They have designed brilliant levels over the years, but Sandy Peterson should also get the same respect, even though I may not be in love with his Doom 2 levels. If Romero is considered an artist and praised for his elaborate and amazing looking maps, then Perdition would be the innovator of Doom level design and known for his experimental style. Perdition's work on Doom 2 may not be my cup of tea, but every single one of his maps brought something new to the table and were very inventive. He has even admitted that his levels weren't as pretty as Romero's or American McGee's maps, but he still ushered in new ways to play the game with his map layouts, and we'll talk about that more later on. Even though I can do without some of Perdition's contributions to Doom 2, that doesn't mean he hasn't made any maps I enjoy. Case in point, Mount Erebus might be my favourite Doom level ever made. And to get this out of the way, of course I'm not blaming Perdition at all, and if he had more time, I'm sure his maps would be much more polished. I couldn't even imagine what it must have been like working at id Software if I was him, trying to crank out 17 maps for one of the most anticipated video game sequels ever created. I respect him a lot as a mapper for his efforts on Doom 2, and either way you think about the final product, the game sold like crazy, and one of the reasons why was that you could actually buy it from a store. id Software and publisher GT Interactive binned the shareware model as Doom 2 was now a fully commercial game. Instead of the episodic structure that Doom 1 followed, Doom 2 makes you play all 32 maps without any breaks in between, which I think hinders the overall experience. Doom 2 would have been better off retaining the episode formats, as the pacing would have been much better. A common complaint that I hear about Doom 2 is the lack of consistency with each map, since they all look and feel so different from one another. I personally believe that this criticism is a bit overblown, since Doom 1 also had rather abstract level design, but in any case, an okay fix for this would have been the return of the episodic structure. So, I'm obviously going to take a look back at Doom 2 today, and it's interesting that the game's level design has been described as being both brilliant and poor. To me, Doom 2 innovated so much and introduced many unique types of maps, but with any first attempt, there are issues. These are my problems with Doom 2. We're going to have ourselves a little marathon here, with me examining each of Doom 2's maps. Think of this video kinda as a pro-Doom episode by Civvy11, but instead of Civvy's wits and great sense of humour, you replace it with some Australian twats. Anyway, let's start with level 1, which is typically a good place to begin. The first map in Doom 2 is Entryway, and it's one of the most iconic maps in the franchise. Out of the 4 original Doom IWADs, Doom 2 has the second best opening map, with Hangar beating it out for obvious reasons. If you look back and walk through this little corridor, you are able to grab the chainsaw, which I think is an amazing piece of level design. Right off the bat, this level teaches the player that thinking outside of the box and exploring the less obvious path will be rewarded in Doom 2 with the hidden chainsaw. Also, I just think that the chainsaw makes this level way more fun to go through. Beyond that, Entryway is a pretty perfect starting map, and as the title implies, it's a fantastic entry into Doom 2. When you walk back at the start of the level, you can see a glimpse of the outside area. Then, using one of the secrets, the player is able to go outside onto the grassy field and obtain the shotgun. I love when Doom maps show you a peek of the outside early on, and that encourages me at least to explore and find a way to access there. E1M1 of the original Doom does this as well, using the blue armor in the Toxic Waste, and I think it's great. That being said, Entryway is very well designed, and it's one of Sandy Peterson's best Doom 2 levels. Underhalls is the mapper that everyone remembers from Doom 2 for one specific reason, that being the Super Shotgun reveal. Apart from this level housing one of the best guns in video game history, Map 2 is another brilliant level in my opinion. While Entryway featured rather open rooms and projectile-based demons to take care of, Underhalls is like the inverse of that design. Long, cramped spaces and hit-scan enemies are what Map 2 comprises of. Sure, there are quite a few imps and pinky demons in this level, but you'll end up fighting groups of shotgunners in dark hallways most of the time. I mean, the map is even called Underhalls for fuck's sake. They do throw a hefty amount of enemies your way for a second level, but that is directly countered by the inclusion of a super shotgun. Another solid map, and this time it was designed by American McGee. A little spoiler before we move on, I generally like all of Doom 2's maps until about when we get up to Tricks and Traps. Map 8 is when the game starts to kinda turn to shit for me. The third map of Doom 2 is pretty damn good, but it's just not as iconic as Entryway or Underhalls. With map 1, well, every map 1 in a Doom game has to be solid, and as for map 2, they introduce the super shotgun. The gauntlet, or gantlet, includes the infamous chain gunner, or heavy weapons dude, and he is the first new enemy in Doom 2. Even though this game is one of my least favourites in the series, I must say that the enemies introduced in Doom radically altered the Doom franchise for the rest of time. The Archvile, the Hell Knight, the Chain Gunners, the Revenant, even the Pain Elemental. All of these were not just throwaway demons that were made up at the last minute, and you can tell that they really tried to make each new monster fit into Doom 2 naturally. As for the map itself, I believe it is well designed, but I don't really have a lot to say about it. The gantlet is just good, and offers up some good gameplay. In the section where the player first encounters the chain gunner, the map presents a couple of options on how to approach the hit-scan enemies ahead. You can either snipe them from afar as they come into your line of sight, or you can just go in this middle room guns blazing and hope for the best. I mean, this map gives you the chain gun and some ammo when you kill the heavy weapons dudes, so it's kind of encouraging you to let loose in that middle room. But yeah, map 3 is a good time. The Focus is up next, and I enjoy this one to a certain extent. This is only my preference, but I believe that the 3 previous maps were more fun. Now don't get me wrong, map 4 is still a solid level, but I do notice my enjoyment decreasing compared to Entryway, Underhalls, and the Gantlets. However, there are some cool traits about this map, like how this window goes up and down so you have to time your attacks effectively. Hit scanners are on the other side, so you have to account for their attacks and try not to get hammered with bullets. This window section lasts like a few seconds, but I'm a fan of it nevertheless. So map 5 is the first map in Doom 2 that I am not a fan of, and it's a shame because I really enjoy the next 2 coming up. I don't find the gameplay or level design that interesting in the waste tunnels. These lifts that immediately go down as you walk on them are more annoying than anything else, as you just get fucked up by the imps below. At least they have health to compensate, but my issue with them is not that they are unfair or difficult, it's just that they're not that fun in my opinion. The rest of the map is fine, I guess. The waste tunnels is a meh experience for me. The Crusher is a much more gimmicky map compared to the previous levels in Doom 2. As you can tell by the map name, there is a Crusher device that you can use to take out a spider mastermind, or a group of Hell Knights on the lower difficulty settings. While this is the first map in Doom 2 that uses a gimmick, the map doesn't rely on it whatsoever. The Crusher device used to kill the Spider Mastermind is awesome, but if you take this gimmick away, then nothing really is lost. Map 6 is still a solid map and can stand on its own 2 feet without the gimmick, which I find to be an important factor to keep in mind with any map. If you make custom levels for Doom, first of all, I must say that I don't have a degree in Doom map design or anything, so take this with a grain of salt. Anyway, if you make a map with a really interesting gimmick, just see when you take out the gimmick if it can stand on its own as a good map. As for the remainder of map 6, it has really fun gameplay, and it also introduces the Revenants, one of my favourite Doom enemies. In the first moments of the map, you are thrown into this dark room with several shotgunners, imps, and one lone Revenant. There are many pillars in the dark room, so you are able to block the Revenant's homing fireballs, but regardless, this is a tense little set piece, and it's the perfect way to introduce the Revenants. Map 7 is dead simple, literally and figuratively, and what can I actually say about this level that hasn't already been said? Almost every Doom 2 Megawad has ripped off Dead Simple for their Map 7s, and it's such a fun map to go through. Tricks and Traps was designed by Sandy Peterson, and he is truly a pioneer of Doom map design. This level offers a collection of doors that contain a unique set of challenges with each one, and while I think Milo Casali's Heck from TNT Evolution executes this idea better, I cannot knock Peterson's creativity here. The room that everyone remembers from this level includes a lone cyber demon and a bunch of barons, and it taking advantage of Doom's infighting. The rest of the rooms are a little unremarkable, but again, back in 1995, Tricks and Traps was the first of its kind and should obviously be respected. At least the room with the narrow hallway and the barons teleporting from either side of you is terrific, and while it is such a simple idea, I think it works as it forces players to strafe in a very tight spot. As for the rest, the room with the Horde of Pinkies is a little bland, the room that has the Kako demons appearing out of these demonic alcoves is pretty cool even though the design of the room itself is rather generic, the Pain Elemental room can be skipped altogether since it doesn't house any keys, and it should be skipped because it sucks, and then the room with the teleporting imps just uses the same idea as the teleporting Baron room, but in larger numbers. How does Tricks and Traps stack up today though? Well, it's fine for what it is, but it ultimately introduced a new Doom level type with each door housing a different challenge, and that's gotta count for something. I can't actually describe why I don't like this map, I just don't get a kick out of playing it. Don't get me wrong, there is a great part in this map with a bunch of demons surrounding this little building here, but that's everything that I find noteworthy in this level. Map 9 is pretty poor. I don't have much to say apart from that. Detailed map analysis, I know. I'm annoyed at myself that I don't like map 10. Because I generally find open areas with lots of demons to fight fun, and refueling base has that. This level is an endurance for sure, and even though I can appreciate that element of it, map 10 feels like a slog more than a fight for survival. If I rush for the exit, the map does not feel rewarding, but if I'm in it for the long haul and I'm scrounging for ammo to stay alive, it feels boring after a while. I know many people love this map for its high enemy counts coupled with the limited ammo, and I understand where you're coming from, but I just can't get into it. I don't think that the map itself is that well designed, and the gameplay can get stale and even frustrating at times, like when I'm dealing with constant pain elementals. Not the fun kind of frustrating either, at least to me. Our main man, John Romero, contributes his first level in Doom 2 with map 11, Circle of Death. It's a decent enough map, with another gimmick that does not get in the way of the gameplay or the core level design. We encounter the Archvile for the first time in this level, who is potentially the most dangerous new monster in Doom 2. Even though I have a ton of issues with this game, I do like how we gradually meet each new enemy. However, as the single player game goes on, Doom 2 naturally runs out of tricks. Speaking only about map 11 though, it's a fine inclusion and has some decent gameplay. The Archvile introduction is not as strong as the Revenant or Chain Gunner reveal, but as a standalone map, Circle of Death does just fine. Oh, and I like how this map is also known as O of Destruction, which is a nod to some nerdy Ultima weapon. Doom directly referencing pop culture and being self-aware is what the franchise is built upon, so it's always fun to see these little homages. The Factory is a weird map, since there are set pieces that I enjoy, but they don't link up to the rest of the level in any way and can be ignored. The large mob of imps in this rather small corridor is fun to deal with, but it is totally unnecessary to go through. The same thing goes with the building filled with shotgunners that you need to carefully climb up in order to get the items. This is awesome, and it most certainly gives you practice for map 29 with the tight staircase, but again, there is no need to go in there, and the rest of map 12 isn't really compelling in my opinion. Speaking of bad maps, let's get into the most infamous map of Doom 2, called Downtown. This level is special in some ways, as it is the first one in official Doom history to feature a cityscape, or something trying to resemble a city. The concept of having a wrecked city to explore in Doom is incredible, but this ultimately falls flat in execution because Downtown is an absolute mess of a map. Thank God for Doom Eternal, as that was the first time in my opinion that the Hell on Earth idea had been fully realized. 20 years later, but still, id Software did a wonderful job with the game. Going back to map 13, my fundamental issue with it is the sheer lack of direction. It doesn't feel like a city, or even just a group of buildings with a clear purpose. The player doesn't feel rewarded for exploring, it honestly feels like a waste of time to, and it shouldn't because this is an open-ended city that should entice you to explore it. The map seems thrown together, and everything feels placed at random. If there needs to be a giant arrow on the grounds pointing to where the player needs to go, then that's typically a bad sign. I want to directly compare Downtown to a previous map from Doom 1, just to make my point further. Episode 3, Mission 6, also known as Mount Erebus, broke new ground in the original Doom game due to its open world design. By the way, both map 13 and E3M6 were designed by Sandy Petersen, so this is a perfectly fair comparison. It's not like I'm pitting one of Sandy Petersen's maps next to another designer's. No, these are both of his works. One of the reasons why Mount Erebus works is because of its landmarks. I think if you want to construct any open world map in Doom, the most important thing to add is landmarks, so the player can get their bearings and know where they are on the map at any given point. I want to do a play-by-play of E3M6 so you have a good idea of what I'm talking about. When we first load up the map, we see the door of a building in the dead center of the screen. The building is uniquely textured, making it relatively easy to locate when playing. This, right here, is a good landmark, and gives the player indication of roughly where they are and where they are going to go. If we look left, we see an island full of items, and on the right, there is another building with fucking skulls on it. Everything so far is pretty distinct and can be easily recognized. The structure that we're looking at now houses a teleporter to the blue key. If we go inside, there's nothing except for monsters, but two areas can be opened up which are marked by the candles on the ground. Now I think having the blue key hidden like this can be a point of criticism, but at least the spot is visually signaled to the player. Additionally, the specific room where the blue key is housed has the same texture as the starting area, representing some importance. With all that mentioned, Mount Erebus has plenty of landmarks and points of interest to 1. Keep the player engaged with the open level design, and 2. Make sure that they aren't lost and wrapped up in some bullshit room that doesn't hold any cool items or secrets. Going back to Downtown, most of these buildings either look the exact same, or are textured in a very similar way. American McGee is back with map 14, and it is definitely his weakest level in Doom 2 for me. I generally enjoy this map, but there's nothing here to write home about. The level mostly involves picking off faraway hitscan enemies that are across from you, and there's also another battle with the Archvile who doesn't pose that much of a threat. The Inmost Ends is great at being a competent Doom 2 map, but it is pretty generic in the long run, especially compared to American McGee's other levels in the game. I mean, this guy designed Dead Simple, The Crusher, Underhalls, and another map that's coming up that I think is better than this one. The key puzzle in map 14 is quite easy to solve, and the whole killing hitscan enemies from afar thing is fun to do during this level. Sandy Peterson had a crack at doing a city level with downtown, but now it's time to talk about John Romero's version of one with map 15. Yeah, I've really warmed up to Industrial Zone, and I find it to be one of the highlights of Doom 2. One improvement that map 15 has over downtown is that the rooftop snipers are handled way better. They are hit scanned this time around, so the player needs to take them out quickly, rather than the map just having a fuck ton of imps throw fireballs at you from half the fucking map away. Industrial Zone creates urgency, while downtown was just pretty annoying. Along with the better enemy placements, map 15 is more focused, and there's a great amount of verticality in this level, with the player having to leap across to different buildings to progress. And both Romero and Peterson utilized the increased height to create unique set pieces. If you go through the secret exit in this level, you move on to maps 31 and 32, and I have a lot to say about them. So we've reached the secret levels of Doom 2. Wolfenstein and Gross. Instead of acting as rather standard secret levels like Fear, Military Base, and Fortress of Mystery, Doom 2's secret maps are more novel, as they are replicating two stages from Wolfenstein 3D. Map 31, Wolfenstein, is a remake of the first level in Wolfenstein 3D, while Map 32, Gross, is paying homage to Wolfenstein's first episode boss fights. Instead of Hans Gross, it just chucked in a cyber demon and called it a day. I love the idea of these secret levels, since they take something old and give it a different spin, similar to what Warren's did in the original Doom. I like that id connected not only Wolfenstein and Doom together, but they also threw in Commander Keen for good measure. However, Map 31 is just Wolfenstein 3D Map 1, which is fine and it's a cool homage, but if you've already played Wolfenstein, then you aren't missing out on much. At least there's this demonic secret spot with stuff inside. In Map 32, which they dubbed the super secret level, it's just a cyber demon fight, but with Nazi symbols on the wall. While I do appreciate that id is celebrating their old properties in this maps, which is a tradition that carries on in their current games, I can't rate these too highly. As I've said, Commander Keen can be located at the end of map 32, which him being included is great, but also annoying. Why couldn't these two secret maps have even more references to id Software history? Maps 31 and 32 could have been this massive celebration of Wolfenstein, Commander Keen, Catacombs 3D, even fucking Dangerous Dave. Maybe they couldn't because of their soft disk publishing agreements, but still, I feel like even if you put in more Commander Keen enemies and references, that would make these maps way more memorable. If Dangerous Dave, Catacombs, and other obscure id titles couldn't have made it in, they should have put in the fucking Dopefish or something. Turn maps 31 and 32 into a hodgepodge of Commander Keen and Wolfenstein 3D. Maybe I'm overthinking these two secret levels, and to be honest they are still cool to see included, but more could have been done. I mentioned that the only sorta gimmicky secret map from the original game was Warren's. That level was a remix of Episode 3, Mission 1, and it's honestly my favourite secret level in that game. The other ones are very standard maps. That's not a knock on them or anything, but it's just strange to even see them as secret levels. Military Base is very good. Fortress of Mystery is fucking boring and hardly worth unlocking, and Fear is just alright. I'm interested in what led them to make secret levels in the original Doom to begin with, as they acted like regular maps for the most part. We have another city level with map 16, and it's not great, but at least it's not as bad as downtown. I don't usually critique the look of a map, but Suburbs is pretty unappealing. We have this bland floor texture, along with the basic shaped buildings that don't really age well, but that won't take you out of the experience too much in my opinion. Apart from that, Suburbs is nothing special, and it's one of the less memorable Doom 2 maps. I know that some people love this one, but it doesn't do too much for me. It's disappointing as well, since the Hell on Earth idea is so compelling. If we look at map 29 from Plutonia, the map designers created this little town area and it actually looks like a town. There's walkways that actually go places, there are quite a few landmarks that the player can use to get their bearings, and the entire map is pleasant to look at. Map 16 hasn't aesthetically aged the best, but at least it's enjoyable to blast through. Map 17 is called Tenements, and I really enjoy this level. The rocky bridge that you have to travel across to grab the red key is probably my favourite bit of gameplay in the level. If you panic and try to avoid the coming attacks too haphazardly, you'll probably fall in the pits. Which is actually not a bad thing, since you can teleport to higher ground that way. You need to focus and plan out what you're gonna do while in that room, since the door immediately shuts and more monsters spawn in. Apart from the bridge section, I also like the part where you need to grab the blue key with revenants and hit scanners attacking you. There are lots of good gameplay moments in Tenements, and the map design is quite pleasant as well. This is another map I've grown a soft spot for. I used to not really find it that remarkable, but I've since replayed it and I've kinda learned to love it. Designed by Sandy Peterson again, map 18, The Courtyard, isn't the most intricate level, but it doesn't have to be, and its simplicity is welcomed. I like the fact that this map lets down its defenses and just says, here's some weapons, an open arena, and a massive group of demons to fight. Have fun. I mean, that's demonstrated perfectly with the yellow key hiding in plain sight. There's no real puzzles to solve or any key hunts, nothing like that. Map 18's just saying, blow some demons up and end the level the same way you came, in a room full of Kevin Cloud's arm hair. Oh, and the way that the courtyard looks is awesome, with all of the creepy faces around and the wood-grass texture combo. I know fans of the Citadel appreciate its magic castle quality, but I'm not a fan of it at all. I see what they're trying to go for, but it doesn't work for me. Whenever I come back to Doom 2 and get to this map, I just use the secret teleporters to bring me to each key so I can finish it as fast as possible. I have no idea why this map is called Gotcha, but this is another gimmicky level that's actually well designed. The gimmick this time around is that the Cyber Demon and the Cyber Mastermind fight on these two podiums. This is awesome, it's like seeing two titans go at it, and when it's all over, you get to fuck up the winner. I usually see the Spider Mastermind win due to its hit scan chain gun, and when we carry on with the level, you can see that it's a well designed map. The gimmick does not interfere or clash with the actual map design, which is a huge plus for me. Gotcha is a very short map, but sometimes that can be a positive. Maps like the Inmost Ends or the Circle of Death work due to their rather short length. That being said, map 20 has many little places to explore, and there are plenty of things to find by just looking around the map. Overall, Gotcha is quality stuff. I know that this is like everyone's least favourite map in Doom 2, or at least it's up there. Map 21, Nirvana, has been called ugly, boring, and too short, and I can agree that it doesn't look that great at all. I will also mention that the blue key is basically worthless since its door is broken and you can just walk through it. But I generally enjoy Nirvana. The gameplay is mostly fun for me, when you have to pick off each set of demons on their separate platform. This map is objectively not great, but I actually like it for some weird reason. People have criticized Nirvana's length, saying that it's way too short, but I think of that as a positive. Sometimes I just enjoy maps that you can blow through in a few minutes. I also enjoy the beginning section with the shotgunners and revenants, as it can get rather frantic if you just let the enemies gang up on you. I know I'm in the minority, but Nirvana is enjoyable and I don't hate it whatsoever. Speaking of enjoyable maps, the Catacombs is up next, and it is both chaotic and fun. This level is American McGee's last contribution to Doom 2, and I believe he delivered with a solid final map. I initially had some trouble with this level, mainly due to the several chain gunners and the revenant homing projectiles fucking up my day. Then I rediscovered that using the normal teleporter, as opposed to the secret teleporter, makes this first section a lot less tough. Similar to the other American McGee maps, the Catacombs is pretty short, but very well designed at the same time. Once you memorize where each chain gunner and revenant is placed so you can prioritize which ones to kill first, the rest of the map is not that challenging. Still though, map 22 is a lot of fun. Barrels of Fun is one of the most polarizing levels in Doom 2. And I don't hate it. The map is pretty experimental, and that's rather par for the course with Perdition. As the title suggests, there is a large group of barrels ready to explode at any moment, but it's not as frustrating as some people claim. I actually prefer getting rid of the barrels early on so they don't become an issue, since they can be your worst enemy in this map. I think the map's gameplay improves when you get to the Spider Mastermind, and it becomes basically like any other Doom 2 map. Barrels of Fun is okay, with the only frustrating part being the abundance of pain elementals and the lost souls that they can generate, but they're annoying in every map, so whatever. Regardless of whether you're a fan of this level or not, map 23 is obviously still significant since it stars the barrels, and uses their surrounding properties for an actual purpose. Oh god. The Chasm is another one of the most controversial Doom 2 levels, and I have very mixed thoughts on it. I honestly don't mind the small ledges, and the idea of tightrope walking in a first-person shooter was unheard of until Sandy Peterson created the Chasm. But I don't believe that the level is all that fun nowadays. Map 24 is extremely ahead of its time, and I can appreciate the historical significance of it, as well as the awesome experimental style of Sandy Peterson's map design, but I usually try and skip past it on subsequent playthroughs. I didn't hate this map at first when replaying it for this video. My hatred for the Chasm comes in when you get up to the exit room, and if you fall off, there's no way to come back. There's teleporters set up in every other portion of the level, except on the way to the exit when there's fucking lost souls everywhere. That's complete nonsense, and I guess this would make sense if there were no teleporters in the map whatsoever, but there is. They just gave a middle finger to every single player right at the end. Apart from that, this level has demon encounters that might seem stale, with the Red Key Room being a prime example of this. There's just Pinky Demon after Pinky Demon, and it gets so tedious taking them out. In fact, the small ledges and the careful movement that the player is forced to do is one of my lesser issues with the map, because there isn't much of a downside for falling down, as there's almost always a teleporter nearby. Nevertheless, the Chasm puts a bad taste in my mouth, mostly due to the level exit not having a teleporter and the map being inconsistent. That all being said, I cannot criticize how creative Sandy Peterson was when coming up with these map layouts, and for that reason alone, he's one of the best Doom level designers to me. And it's funny I say that because most of his Doom 2 levels aren't my cup of tea, and I'm not a huge fan of them, but his maps are still very influential. Bloodfalls is one of the more edgy Doom 2 map names, but the level itself is okay. I recently finished this map with a pistol start, and I've gotta say, it's much more fun compared to just playing sequentially like normal. Once you have the BFG, and if you're playing in order you should have it by now, but anyway, it makes Bloodfalls way too easy. The most difficult section is the beginning, and after that, map 25 becomes a cakewalk. Yeah, this map has pretty weird pacing. On the topic of the BFG, an interesting aspect about Bloodfalls is how the difficulty affects whether or not you can find one in the map. If a player accesses the second secret on the first 3 difficulty settings, the BFG will appear like usual, but that changes when you crank it up to Ultra Violence or Nightmare. The second secret still exists and you can tag it like normal, but the BFG won't be there at all, making it especially difficult for pistol starters. Anyway, aside from that bit of trivia about the map, the blood waterfalls are kinda cool to see, but every other design choice in this level feels bland. Map 25 is average at best, but as we're approaching the final few levels, average at best shouldn't be in this level's vocabulary. It seems that almost every Doom game has a strong start, but then it kinda dips in quality towards the end. Even going back to the original Doom, Episode 3 Mission 8, Dis, was very underwhelming, along with the penultimate level, Gate to Limbo. All I'm saying is that it's not exclusively a Doom 2 issue, but at least the next map picks up the quality. Now this map reminds me of Tenements with its cramped spaces and narrow walkways, and I really enjoy it. The abandoned mines is a little on the short side, but that's fine as the gameplay and map design shine through. I'm personally a fan of shorter levels anyway, so it's not really a big deal in my eyes. The part where the Baron pops up out of nowhere when you're trying to get the blue key still gets me to this very day, and it's a great gameplay bit. Dodging Cacodemon fireballs in these small contained hallways feels amazing, and taking out the chain gunners located in the top corners is fun too. Map 26 is a great time, and it's certainly an improvement from Bloodfalls. Monster Condo is certainly an interesting map, and it reminds me a ton of something like Black Tower from Doom 2's master levels. There are plenty of traps to spring, the area with the hanging bodies, the cluster of pain elementals, and the archvile can be a pain in the arse, but it has a fair trade-off with the BFG secrets, and the teleport room featuring Mancubi and Revenants is great fun to play. Monster Condo is a weird gem of a map, and while it doesn't have the best texture work, and some of the rooms might feel bland compared to other Doom 2 levels, the atmosphere and lighting really make it shine. Map 27 is dark, but it's not overly dark where you can't see anything. The high visibility goggles will help the player navigate around the level, but it's not a necessity like in Halls of the Damned for instance. This might be one of Sandy Peterson's best Doom 2 levels, and I've really come to appreciate this one more as time goes by. Map 28 feels extremely similar to Bloodfalls, and what I mean by this is that the map is extremely mediocre in my opinion. I love how the pain elementals are in prisons, almost as if id Software is admitting how annoying those enemies can be, and there's a few other decent set pieces here and there, but there's also nothing special or mind-blowing. While I'm a fan of the volcanic look of this open arena, the way that the beginning of the map looks is just bad, as the browns contrast weirdly with the blood reds and lava stone texture. Gameplay-wise, the Spirit World is fine, but it kinda just blends in with other Doom 2 maps. Not terrible, but again, like Bloodfalls, average at best shouldn't be in Map 28's vocabulary. Romero got a hold of Map 29, and holy fuck, he made an excellent penultimate stage. I like how in this level, the goal is not only composed of collecting keys and getting to the end, but instead it's more about climbing up this cliffside to fight the Cyber Demon at the top. Even though you can just run to the exit and avoid the Cyber Demon's rockets, I appreciate that there is at least some attempt at a boss at the end of the journey up the cliff. This level is challenging, and it feels like a combination of everything you have learnt so far playing the game. If this was the final map of Doom 2, it would not have disappointed. There's a good challenge factor, as I've said, and there's also a very interesting design choice at play with the whole scaling up the mountain idea. As I said, this would be a perfect ending to Doom 2. But no, we have the icon of sin to deal with next. This map is very underwhelming, point blank. Even though I love the design of the Icon of Sin, how he looks like the Baphomet, and how it's essentially the ultimate representation of Satan in the Doom universe, the gameplay in this map sucks. You shoot 3 rockets into the Icon of Sin's exposed brain, and that's it. The final boss encounter is not really fun to fight, because you need to have a precise shot to the brain, and if you miss, you have to clear the board of enemies, wait for the lift to take you up, and try again. Map 30 is not that difficult, but when you beat the Icon of Sin, it's not rewarding at all. The boss doesn't feel like the ultimate test of your Doom abilities, it's just shooting rockets with some decent timing. This boss makes me appreciate Doom Eternal's last level way more. Even though Final Sin is not perfect, it at least attempts to throw everything at the player so it puts all of your acquired Doom Eternal skill into effect. With Doom 2's Icon of Sin, it feels like a throwaway concept. And that's it. Doom 2 is complete. And although it is my least favourite classic Doom IWAD, the game still introduced so many unique level design ideas to the table. We have so much more demon infighting, with the Cyber Demon vs Spider Mastermind battle being the culmination of that. We had larger map variety and a focus on more abstract design. There is double or even triple the amount of enemies on screen than in Doom 1, and even though I don't think many Doom 2 levels fully hold up, that doesn't mean they don't deserve to exist or anything. Doom 2's levels were so special back in 1995 and forged a path ahead for Doom mapping. There are problems with Doom 2, but its legacy is still felt to this very day. However, there is only one new weapon with the Super Shotgun, which by itself is great and iconic, but when the trailer advertises that there will be new weapons, plural, yeah, that's not cool.
The new weapons, although at this point we haven't settled in on exactly what those weapons will be, but there will be new weapons.
At least the new enemies, while a couple of them are just color swaps of previous Doom 1 demons, each one of them shakes up the gameplay enough to warrant their existence. Just to be clear, I don't hate Doom 2, in fact I am very glad it exists. In a vacuum, the new enemy variants and the Super Shotgun in Doom 2 are great, and help flesh out the experience. For example, there are now a lot more mid-tier demons thanks to Doom 2, that modders and map makers can use for their custom WODs. One of the issues I've heard regarding Doom 1 consists of the lack of demon variety and how that can make some levels rather repetitive. I personally disagree with that sentiment, but either way, Doom 2 fixes that by having more types of enemies, and that in turn has dramatically changed the Doom series as a whole. The fact that the new monsters and their various attack patterns and designs were mapped out in only 10 months is astonishing. It's actually incredible how they pulled it off. Praising Doom 2's innovations aside, I still have problems with quite a few of its levels, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. Thank God for Doom Eternal fully realizing the Hell on Earth concept. Anyway, next time I'll be covering the Plutonia Experiment and TNT Evolution, the two megawads that make up Final Doom. The map count for both games totals to 64 fucking levels, and reviewing each and every level individually would take up too much of your time. Instead, I'm going to talk about Final Doom more generally, rather than dissect each stage. But for now, according to Doom 2's end screen at least, the invasion is over. Final Doom is a weird product. Released in 1996, the game was just more Doom, which isn't bad at all, but this came out in the same year as Duke Nukem 3D and Quake. The game didn't feature any new weapons or enemy types, and from a technical standpoint, there wasn't much on offer compared to other contemporary shooter games. Final Doom and its two megawads, the Plutonia Experiment and TNT Evolution, came and went. Over the years, TNT and Plutonia have received an interesting reception. Plutonia is often praised for its innovative yet consistent level design and its punishing difficulty, but I've also seen a ton of people take issue with the latter. On the other side of the coin, TNT has been both celebrated by Doom fans as well as ridiculed. Final Doom has split the community ever since its release in 1996, and there's no overwhelming consensus. I am in the same boat of people who are mixed on TNT and Plutonia, since as a whole, there are incredible moments, as well as shitty moments that taint the overall Final Doom product. With that said, I think it's best to go through both megawads and pick out sections that I enjoy and absolutely fucking hate. Oh, and just to get this out of the way, TNT and Plutonia are hard as fuck, and will test most Doom players. In 1995, Team TNT started work on a new megawad for Doom 2, named the New Technology Evolution, or simply TNT Evolution. This group of WAD makers were going to release this level set online for free, but id Software snatched up the game last minute and made it a commercial product as the first half of Final Doom. Team TNT released a press statement on the 27th of October about the news, and rightfully so, this pissed off a ton of people. They were going to release TNT Evolution for free, but it had been bought out by id. That's like if I made a Super Mario Bros. Mod, and when I'm just about to release it free of charge, like literally the day of, Nintendo tosses me some money and puts it out commercially. The distribution of TNT Evolution is very weird, and even though it's not a big deal now obviously, it's pretty ridiculous that id Software did that to begin with. Two members of Team TNT, brothers Dario and Milo Casali, were hired to do a separate megawad for Final Doom, and that ended up being the Plutonia Experiment. If I ever started a band, I would want to name it Plutonia. It's such a fucking awesome word. Out of the 32 maps in Plutonia, they split the work equally and designed 16 levels each. The recommended order for playing Final Doom is that you start off with TNT and then graduate to playing the Plutonia Experiment. The reason being is that Plutonia is much harder than TNT Evolution, and while TNT is more difficult than Doom 2 for instance, it's still pretty fair for the most part. I will touch on Plutonia more later on, but for right now, we need to examine TNT's levels. To put it simply, TNT Evolution is a mixed bag. When TNT is good, it's really good, and the game has higher highs than Doom 2. At the same time, it also has lower lows, as most of the bad levels are downright terrible. When a map is poorly designed in TNT, it sticks out like a sore thumb and downgrades the overall experience by a huge margin for me. However, when the game is at its best with maps like Pharaoh, Caribbean, Wormhole, Heck, or Stronghold to name a few, TNT becomes like the best IWAD to play. Unfortunately, there is more often than not mediocre map design plaguing TNT, and it's a real shame because most of these map creators have gone on to do amazing work. The only designer that has a perfect record on TNT is Dario Casali, who made the two secret maps, Pharaoh and Caribbean. That is if you discount his work on map 18, Mill, as that level is one of my lesser favourites. Mill is way too big for its own good, and you end up running about the place so much that it becomes unbearable. Now, backtracking is normal in Doom, and oftentimes it can be quite fun searching for new areas in places you've already been, but map 18 goes overboard with that. For all its mishaps and shitty design choices, TNT at least starts out decent enough. I mean, the Berserk power-up is accessible right out of the gate in the first level, and that's amazing. Pro tip for any map makers out there, putting a Berserk in map 1 will always put a smile on the player's face. TNT's first level reminds me a ton of Entryway, and it's a perfectly good map to start out the Megawad. Human Barbecue, Power Control, and Wormhole are up next, and they are all quality maps. So far, there are no issues with TNT, and the difficulty is very steady, with it being harder than Doom 2, but the game still keeps things fair. I mentioned earlier that Wormhole is a personal highlight, and it took me a couple of replays to fully appreciate that map. This level attempts to have a mirror dimension where you play through the same section again, but things are altered, and I love that. If you hop through this teleporter, you end up in a much more difficult version of the same map layout. That's an amazing idea, and this map is fantastic, with the only blemish being that the level exit switch is on the easier section, so people can totally bypass what makes this map so unique. TNT keeps up a good level of quality until map 7, Prison. This stage is way too big, and that criticism is one of my fundamental issues with the entire Megawad. TNT has quite a few maps that stretch so far and are so open-ended for no fucking reason. For instance, map 8, Metal, has multiple large arenas with hit-scan enemies included, and they don't feel designed with any rhyme or reason. There are also maps that feel like an endurance to finish due to their size, and after a while, they start to become fucking unbearable. Central Processing, Mount Payne, Baron's Den, and Administration Center are my go-to examples. At least with Mount Payne, I can tell that the designers were playing into the whole endurance idea, and the map being an endurance for players to finish was their intention. I think Mount Payne works in that case, considering that it's one of the final levels of the game. The lack of health pickups and hit-scan enemies that can drain your life in a single blast also help enforce that fight for survival element of the map. I generally like Mount Payne, even though the map design itself is nothing too special. However, the other maps I mentioned before feel long and open-ended just for the sake of it. Just because you can make a gigantic map with sprawling combat zones, it doesn't mean you should or that it would add to your level in any way. That is one of TNT's fatal design flaws, and after a couple of these large levels, you get sick of it. Luckily, there are some palette cleanser maps in TNT that are way more focused. One of my favorites of these that doesn't really get a lot of shine is map 23, Lunar Mining Project. It's a very short and sweet map that doesn't overstay its welcome. Team TNT wanted to really nail the realistic environment aesthetic with TNT Evolution, and I think map 23 is the ultimate representation of this. There are sleeping quarters with armor in the wardrobe, I love it. There is an office space with computer monitors and a bookshelf inside, and there's also a mineshaft you have to go down to grab one of the keys. Even though we don't have space mining colonies in real life, this is the perfect Doom rendition of one, and it's great. Anyway, when you finish map 8, Metal, you get to play another TNT highlight with Stronghold. This level is just an onslaught of demons, and you get to fuck up each and every one of them. You're not really trying to survive the monsters, it feels more like a bloodbath than anything else. Map 9's premise is simple and it's great. Unfortunately, TNT dips in quality after this, and apart from a handful of levels, the Megawad becomes pretty mediocre. From map 10 to the very last level in TNT Evolution, I only really enjoy Deepest Reaches, Shipping/Respawning, Lunar Mining Project, Mount Payne, Heck, Last Call, Pharaoh, and Caribbean. The rest of the maps are either okay with some glaring issues, bland and not really worth replaying, or simply bad. The maps that I pointed out as my favourites are really good in my eyes, or they have some quirk or interesting quality that makes them stand out. My overall reaction with TNT Evolution is that the highs are really high, the lows are really low, and then the WOD is also loaded with maps that are very throwaway. TNT is quite spotty, with maps going up and down and up again in quality, so that leaves TNT being pretty decent. Not perfect, but when the maps work, the game is extremely enjoyable. An example of a throwaway map is with map 11, Storage Facility. The thing is, map 19, Shipping/Respawning, is just a better version of map 11's general idea of a level being located in a storage containment factory. I'm not sure why we needed both maps included, even though they give off the same exact feeling, but whatever. At the time of making this video, I do prefer TNT Evolution to Doom 2, because the best maps in TNT eclipse the best from Doom 2, probably except for the Living End. I mean, just to make my point, map 28, Heck, is basically a refined take on Tricks and Traps from Doom 2. Designed by Milo Casali, Heck presents a selection of rooms that the player needs to navigate to grab each key to open the level exit door. Each room presents its own unique challenge, and the pace of the map is brilliant. There's only a couple of doors to pick from to ensure that everything doesn't feel similar. All of the demon encounters are great, and map 28 might be my favourite level from TNT Evolution actually. I didn't really know where to put this in the video, but I need to talk about Habitat for a moment. I guess it's fitting that after I talk about my favourite map in TNT Evolution, I then examine what is dubbed the worst map in the game. Map 22, Habitat, is without a doubt one of the most infamous levels in Doom history, and there's a couple of reasons for that. For one, Habitat is considered really ugly, and I can't say that I disagree. When we first load up the map, we can see this putrid combination of toxic waste and a water stream. It just looks amateurish, and the inclusion of these brown pillars and gross wall textures makes this even worse. I mean, look at this, would you like to play this? Anyway, as we continue on with the map, we come across a grassy open field with an arch vial ready to fuck you up if you aren't already prepared. This area might be the best looking section of the entire level, but that's not really saying much. If you run past this fake wall, you are able to grab the blue key, something that is not required in the slightest to beat the map. In fact, if you just run over here, open up this door, and run some more, you'll be at the exits. This is fucking mind-blowing. How can they fuck up a level this bad? Even if you do explore the rest of the map, specifically the underground tunnel section, it's not fun to in my opinion. This part is confusing, not enjoyable to navigate, and you're harassed by hit scanners and pinky demons. I recommend just grabbing the BFG secrets and gunning for the exits. Habitat is a load of fuck, and as I've already mentioned, the level after, Map 23, Lunar Mining Project, is way more entertaining and visually interesting. Before we wrap up TNT with Map 30, I wanted to vomit out my appreciation for the two secret maps again. I think there are various maps in TNT that try and give the player a tense feeling, but fail in doing so. Maps 31 and 32 succeed. Whenever I play both of these maps, I actually feel concerned about my next move and what the map would throw at me next. I do prefer Pharaoh out of the two secret maps, and a big part of why is due to the atmosphere. The music, the textures, and the way that the map is laid out works so well to me, and I can't get enough of it. I know Caribbean has more enemy encounters and that Pharaoh might feel a bit empty for some people, but that's part of its charm. I love walking through this massive deserted pyramid and the Egyptian landscape, trying to figure out what puzzle I need to solve next. That being said, there are still plenty of challenging demon battles in the level, but if you're not a fan of Pharaoh's slower pace, then you can just cheese it to Caribbean. TNT rounds off with map 30, Last Call, which is a solid Icon of Sin map. Many players are turned off at the start with the torch platform puzzle, where you have to follow the correct path, and if you make one wrong step, the game kills you. I understand people's frustration with this beginning puzzle, as the final map should be testing your acquired combat skills and not your mind, but there's actually a way to solve it in-game without the use of a guide. The torches in the opening room signify the order of the platforms you need to hop on, and that's pretty clever. If we carry on with the map, there are a couple of more demon encounters that aren't that difficult, and sooner or later we get up to the final arena with the Icon of Sin. Instead of riding a lift to shoot rockets into his brain at a very specific time like in Doom 2, you only need to sit on the second highest step on the staircase, fire at him, and that's it. I think TNT has the strongest map 30 compared to Doom 2 and Plutonia, but it's too bad that the game as a whole is so jumbled in quality. The Plutonia Experiment was made in only a few months by the Casali brothers, but they churned out a pretty amazing product. If you play Doom a bit more casually, or maybe you usually play it on a lower difficulty setting, then Plutonia might not be your favourite game. This megawad is intended for experienced Doom players, and if you aren't careful, Plutonia's maps will fuck you up. Dario and Milo Casali split up the work between them, and you can see the effort put in. Apart from the original Doom, the Plutonia Experiment might be the most consistent game out of the 4 iWads. I believe that the first 2/3 of Plutonia are more or less great, but then the level of quality starts to drop at around map 20, and only really picks up again when we get into map 29, Odyssey of Noises. Instead of being all over the place like TNT, the Plutonia Experiment is brilliant with few exceptions for around 20 maps, and after that, the game runs out of steam. The Death Domain, Impossible Mission, Tombstone, the Final Frontier, the Temple of Darkness, Bunker, Antichrist, and the Sewers, so basically maps 20 to 28, are either painfully mediocre or just poor. That being said, I want to focus on the good aspects of Plutonia, because there is a lot to like. Many levels feel like a combat puzzle that the player needs to solve, and while people have used the puzzle analogy for other Doom games, I feel like it's most relevant with Plutonia. I always find myself checking where the exit is, predicting if it'll get blocked off, thinking about what weapon I should use to fight off the incoming enemies, and whether I should circle strafe like crazy or use cover. I love how much Plutonia makes the player think about their decisions, and while you do think in other classic Doom games, Plutonia takes this idea to the next level. The Casali brothers really knew what they were doing when it came to designing maps, and where to place the enemies so that they would bring out the most challenge. For instance, Archviles are sometimes paired with chain gunners, so you have a constant stream of bullets firing at you. Pain elementals are used more as distractions in order for higher tier monsters to hit you easier. Oh, and I forgot to mention how Revenants are almost featured in Plutonia more than imps.
Yeah, Plutonia is really it really holds up. It's very fun to play, and it's
Thank you.
probably one of the most difficult map sets that are like official id Software products. And I think
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, there was on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like Revenants?
Well, see, they're so useful as a gameplay tool because you can put them in the mid distance, and it's really tough. You have to bring out your rocket launcher because you can't really shoot them at distance with much else. Yeah. And then if you bring your rocket launcher out, you better not have any demons or anything in the near ground. You're going to blow yourself up. So they are really useful.
Yes.
Area of denial of large areas. So yeah, we love those guys. And we made the maps really hard because we played so much that we wanted something that was going to be a challenge, because we'd play maps and we'd just kind of zombie our way through them without really breaking a sweat, and we really wanted to break a sweat, so we kept that's the kind of experience we were going for. And then Milo did the insane secret level Go To It. And I thought, what the hell are you doing? This is ridiculous. And that ended up being, okay, so that's the only way we can break a sweat now, is these ridiculous maps with massive numbers of monsters in them.
So yeah, the enemy placement in Plutonia's maps can be fucking frustrating, but that's kind of the point. I also want to praise the level exit portal that the Casali brothers made for Plutonia. To put it simply, it's a very cool design, and when you step onto one to finish the level, it's the best feeling in the world. Speaking of the maps themselves, the game starts strong with the first 11 levels, with my only real exception being map 3, Aztec. Getting the blue key in that map can be pretty fucking annoying, and I don't think the gameplay on offer in Aztec is that engaging. Apart from that small blemish, maps 1 to 11 are very good, with my personal favourites out of those being Abattoir, Ghost Town, and Courtyard. I mentioned that the first 11 maps in Plutonia are fantastic, as when we get into map 12, Speed, there's a bump in the road. While it's not terribly designed, it feels too dragged out for its own good, and I don't enjoy this level as much as the previous ones. The two maps after map 12, titled The Crypt and Genesis, are fun but deadly. In map 13, The Crypt specifically, the archviles that the player needs to fight will definitely fuck you up if you're not paying attention. The archviles attacks aren't exactly a problem at first, but when they also respawn the hordes of enemies that you killed in this open area and basically use them as shields so you can't kill the archviles, that's where the issue lies. This is a brilliant trap, as it perfectly understands the monster's capabilities and how they can challenge the player when they are all grouped together. Map 14, Genesis, is after this, and it's a very fun experience. The game takes another dip in quality with map 15, The Twilights, mostly due to the level's annoying design. There's an overabundance of monsters, and while that's not inherently a bad thing, all of them chipping off your health at once can get a little too frustrating. I'm just not really a fan of this map, but at least it's short and there's multiple ways to end the level with the normal and secret exits. The few set of maps following The Twilights might be my favourites in Plutonia. Map 16, The Omen, has extremely tight and enjoyable gameplay, and while it isn't the nicest looking level, it gets straight to the point and has some solid combat encounters. The section with the teleporting revenants is so much fun to deal with, as well as the monster barrage near the red key location. This ending part with the group of hit scanners on these platforms demonstrates the creativity of Plutonia. As you can see with the footage, I'm trying out different weapon combinations to quote, solve the puzzle, for lack of a better term. After I attempt to clear the room with 2 BFG shots, I go on to use the rocket launcher, chain gun, and shotgun because I might desperately need the BFG for an archvile or something later on in the game. That's what I'm saying with Plutonia. It makes you think about the rooms and even levels ahead, and I don't really think about that much when playing other classic Doom games. Map 17, Compound, is next, and it's another fun level that the player can more or less breeze through. This map is a welcome change of pace, as the difficulty is not that absurd compared to the rest of Plutonia. As pointed out by many people already, Map 18 Neurosphere shares the same sort of design as the inmost ends from Doom 2. This map grabs your attention right off the bat with hit scanners immediately firing at you. Even though the beginning can be difficult to handle, Map 18 becomes easier as you go on, and it's one of the highlights of the game. Map 19, Enemy, is after this, and it includes a random cyber demon fight along with a couple of nasty traps. I love this level. And having said that, map 16 to 19, for me personally, is my favourite little phase of Plutonia. Maybe that's because after map 19, Plutonia's maps become either just okay or bad until Odyssey of Noises. Map 20, the Death Domain, is rather short in length, but the gameplay is all over the place. This map has fun and interesting set pieces, like the teleporting barons, and that's it. The rest I can do without, and to me, map 20 is the first bad map of Plutonia. Map 21, Slayer, is nothing special as well, but at least it doesn't drag on for too long. Unlike map 22, Impossible Mission. This level is too big, and it feels like a slog when you're backtracking to flick switches and grab keys. Plus, the demon encounters aren't that inventive or engaging. For the majority of these later maps, Plutonia runs out of tricks, and they become too open and large for their own good. That statement rings especially true for map 23, Tombstone, which might be the worst map of the game. Most of the rooms in map 23 look identical, the enemy encounters are boring, and the key collecting is not fun. Everything feels the same in Tombstone, and it's funny I said that when map 24 is around the corner, since that level is essentially a retread of the Living End in Doom 2. Map 24, The Final Frontier, is fine, but there's nothing much else to say about it. The next level is also bland, with the only interesting design in map 25 being this little boat in in the lava. Most of the levels after map 20 aren't terrible by any stretch, but Plutonia as a megawad loses steam and these maps become pretty unremarkable. That being said, map 26, Bunker, is bad in my eyes. But if you find mindlessly shooting demons in a long trench enjoyable, then you'll definitely get a kick out of it. Map 27, Antichrist, is Plutonia's second retread of Doom 2's The Living End level. Map 24 and map 27 share basically the same layouts, and I think I prefer Antichrist, but the levels blend together too much in my mind to make a call on that. Map 28, The Sewers, is up next, and fuck, it's too drawn out, too wide open, too generic, and too tedious to talk about further. The only saving grace about map 28 is that it brings us to one of the best maps in the Plutonia Experiment: Odyssey of Noises. This level kicks so much ass, and it's how you should make a city map in Doom. There are proper landmarks that you can look at to get your bearings. There are snipers in the windows that are actually fun to fight. The level is rather difficult, so you'll no doubt lose some health, which gives you an actual reason to explore each building, and on top of that, Odyssey of Noises is pleasant to look at. The entire map is visually interesting, specifically with how the green grass and brown buildings contrast heavily with the blood red sky and hellish pit below. I know that some people might not like this level due to its focus on exploration and picking off enemies one at a time, but I absolutely love it. This is proof that a drawn out Plutonia map can be done right. This is also proof that a city map can be done right. After Odyssey of Noises is done, Plutonia wraps up with a rather standard yet entertaining Icon of Sin map. The timing required to hit the Icon of Sin is not as irritating as Doom 2, there's more build up to the fight this time around, and Plutonia throws in a cyber demon for good measure. Overall, map 30, The Gateway of Hell, is an adequate final level that doesn't reinvent the wheel, but does a good job regardless. Now, Plutonia's secret maps are notorious for being extremely tough on the player. Map 31, Cyberden, holds up really well and I had a lot of fun with it. There's not too much to comment on with Cyberden, it's just a solid secret map. Map 32, on the other hand, is infamous for being the prototype of slaughter maps, and I'm not a huge fan of it. I know people love these kind of maps where you basically run out onto an open field and kill everything, but it's not exactly my cup of tea. So yeah, Final Doom is done, and the difficulty for both games can get insane. I have more clips of me dying and starting over in Final Doom than days I've been alive. But that aside, Final Doom is inconsistently good. TNT Evolution has some strong moments for sure, but its bad maps are just as prevalent. Even though the Plutonia Experiment is mostly excellent, there is a long streak of subpar levels in the game's last third until map 29. However, the one thing that needs to not be discredited is the effort that the Casali brothers and Team TNT put into Final Doom. Team TNT had incredible map designers work on Evolution, and regardless of the Megawad's overall quality, all of these guys have put out other amazing work. On the other hand, Dario and Milo Casali are fucking wizards, and I'm not surprised in the slightest that they continue to have amazing careers in the video game industry to this day. I can't believe that the Casalis were about my age when they were approached to make Plutonia, but I'm so glad they did. I prefer Plutonia as well as TNT Evolution over Doom 2, and for a couple of glorified fan-made megawads, that is impressive. Doom 2 opened up a ton of doors for the Doom community, and I'm very thankful that it exists. Not only do I really like the game, even though I have some issues with it, but the inclusion of the super shotgun and new enemy types gave people more opportunities to create custom map packs and game modifications. After Final Doom was released in 1996, there were several add-ons for Doom 2 made for the PC and also other console ports of the game. While all of these expansions were official products, they weren't made by id Software in-house and were instead developed by contracted map makers and other third-party third-party companies. The add-ons I'm looking at today are the master levels for Doom 2, No Rest for the Living, and I'll even play those Xbox exclusive Doom maps that were packaged in with the Doom 3 Collector's Edition. These are the many expansions for Doom 2. Starting out with the master levels, I love the history of how this expansion came into existence. In the 90s, there was a market for unofficial Doom compilations and megawads being sold, and companies like WizardWorks and Wraith Corporation ran with it. This is no doubt illegal, and in my next Doom video I will cover these unofficial commercial products in more detail. Having said that, id Software were getting annoyed at these guys basically selling shovelware mods of their games, so they struck back with the master levels for Doom 2. I love how the master levels were born out of spite, and to quote, give the D-Zone guys a run for their money. The master levels was a 21 level WOD pack created by various map designers put under contract by id. Instead of having level progression like in Doom 1, Doom 2, TNT Evolution, and Plutonia, the master levels are just individual maps that you need to play at a pistol start. I personally think that this is where most of the quote master challenge comes from, except for a few maps that get really tricky. This expansion was packaged alongside Maximum Doom, which is just a shitty bonus compilation filled with over 1,000 WOD files downloaded from the internet. I betcha that there was no vetting process and they were picked at absolute random. About 90% of the Maximum Doom WODs suck, and there's no real reason to play them nowadays, unless you're some kind of masochist. The only reason Maximum Doom was released with the master levels was to compete with the D-Zone discs that WizardWorks were putting out. In case you didn't know, D-Zone was a series of Doom mod compilations that were falsely advertised and had no quality control, exactly like Maximum Doom. D-Zone wasn't the only unofficial WOD compilation released, in fact there's tons of them. The Boom Classic Power Pack, the Deathgate Mega Collection, Doom Mania, Doom Explosion, and more. But besides the packaging, they might as well be the exact same thing. Anyway, there were 6 authors tied to the master levels, and they include Dr. Sleep, Jim Flynn, Christian Cly, Cranium, Tom Mustaine, Tim Willits, and his sister, Teresa Chaser. Christian Cly and Tom Mustaine actually helped create 2 of the unofficial commercial Doom products, notably the lost episodes of Doom and Perdition's Gate respectively. Tom Mustaine eventually worked on Doom Resurrection, the iOS game that came out in 2009, but before that he also designed TNT Evolution Map 1, System Control, Map 10, Redemption, and Map 17, Processing Area. And of course, how can we forget Tim Willits, who got himself a job at id Software in 1995 and worked there for many years until 2019. In general though, all of these map designers have contributed so much to the Doom community, and if I recall correctly, that's where the term master levels stems from. These designers were some of the masters of the Doom community due to their talents and passion for the game. But does the master levels stack up today? I think it'll be best if I go through each level in the expansion and review them. Since the master levels are just a group of WOD files without any real progression, they have been ordered in several different ways over the years. The PlayStation version of Final Doom, which includes a selection of maps from TNT, Plutonia, and the master levels, has its own level order, but they are usually sorted alphabetically on PC. What I'm going to do is group each map based on the designer, starting with Tim Willits' levels. Tim Willits only designed 2 of the master levels, named Attack and Canyon. Both of these maps hold up pretty well, with Attack being a personal standout for me. Attack was featured as map 1 in the PlayStation version of Final Doom, and that makes perfect sense because it's a solid starting level. It has a decent challenge to it without being totally cheap or unfair, and I love its rather symmetrical map layouts. As for Canyon, I can personally do without this map, but that's not to say that it's awfully designed or anything. I'm just not a fan of it compared to Attack. Overall, Tim Willits did a pretty sound job on the master levels, and I'm not surprised he landed a job at id Software. I appreciate the work Tom Mustaine did for TNT Evolution and some of the unofficial commercial Doom products, but I don't like his only master levels map, Paradox.wad. The castle fort design is awesome as a concept, but I don't think the map stuck the landing, and the end result was rather poor in my eyes. Traversing the castle is just annoying, and also getting each key is a tedious process by stepping onto each teleporter. The demon battles are nothing to write home about, and are ruined by the overall clunky design and feel of the map. This is a master level that I would skip on subsequent playthroughs, but it's alright, because Tom Mustaine is great and has done amazing work for the Doom community otherwise. Christian Clay is another prominent mapper in the Doom community, and his efforts on the master levels are quite interesting. I think the Catwalk and Subterra are very competent levels, but then at the same time, the Fistula, the Combine, and Subspace are mediocre to just meh. The only bad level that Christian made for the master levels, in my opinion, was the Garrison, especially with the stupid way you need to collect the yellow key and how the map looks quite unappealing. While the Catwalk and Subterra are pretty damn good, the rest of Christian's maps are a mixed bag, as I mentioned before, and I'm not in a rush to play them again. Out of all the Doom 2 master level designers, Christian Clay has the most spotty record, with some maps being good, others being okay, and then I don't really like the Garrison at all. The next designer on the list goes by the alias of Cranium, and he produced 5 maps out of 21 for the master levels. Most of Cranium's maps are extremely intricate and have distinct styles to them. Starting off with Black Tower, this level is an absolute treasure. The basic objective is to head up to the top of this tower and then rappel back down in order to activate the exits. If you have an idea of what you're doing, Black Tower isn't that difficult to finish, but there's still a lot of steps required to grab all of the keys and run to the exits. You have to try to figure out each puzzle in the Black Tower, and it's more complex than you may initially think. I personally love this map, and some of the traps packed into it can be fucking deadly. Take this Baron of Hell for example. He is right in your face, throwing fireballs, and you can't back off straight away because there's a crusher trap to delay you. So your best course of action is to have your BFG or plasma gun ready, which requires previous knowledge of what's coming up. And that's going to be the make or break of this map for players. I love the fact that you need to learn what exactly awaits you in the tower and be prepared, but I know that others might find that to be annoying, especially with how long the level is anyway. That all aside, the atmosphere that Black Tower gives off is fantastic. It truly feels like a mythical, eerie place, and it's one of my favourite master levels. Unfortunately, as we progress with Bloodsea Keep, I find things more frustrating. While I can appreciate how visually pleasant this map is, I don't find the gameplay that engaging. The abundance of lost souls and crushing ceilings are enough to make me not enjoy this map. You constantly find lost souls getting in your way, and even though Bloodsea Keep is not hard at all, it's not that entertaining either. Again, I love how this map looks, and the attention to detail with all of the castle's bits and pieces, like the library area, the lava moat, the carpeted hallway, the furnace with the hanging body, and the jail cell, but along with those amazing design elements is the annoying gameplay with a barrage of pinky demons and lost souls. It's a shame because the general layout of Bloodsea is so fucking good, but the enemy placement is baffling. That same complaint rings true with Cranium's next level, Mephisto.wad. Mephisto features 4 Icon of Sin faces in this square room, along with a desert area with a whole bunch of revenants. I'm confused on why they placed revenants of all creatures in this open area, since killing them all becomes very tedious very fast, and instead of thinking about the combat, I'm just mindlessly strafing and shooting, almost like a fucking Serious Sam game. When the player reaches the Icon of Sin room, it's more strafing around revenants, and in general, while I really enjoy how the map looks, I'm not impressed with the gameplay on offer. The Icon of Sin and Desert Arenas look pretty cool though, and the latter reminds me of the Area 51 level in Duke Nukem 3D. It's too bad that the demon encounters remind me of Serious Sam. We wrap up Cranium's maps with the Express Elevator to Hell and Bad Dream, the two levels that make up Teeth.wad. I can only speak for myself, but the Express Elevator to Hell is way too confined and not fun to maneuver through. There's an over-reliance on hit scanners chipping away at your health, and since every room and hallway is so narrow, they'll blast you at point blank range and it's just not enjoyable for me. I can recognize that the elevator concept can be an interesting one, but I don't think this map specifically pulls it off well at all. Express Elevator to Hell is claustrophobia the level, and I can't get into it. If you take the secret exit in this level, you wind up in Bad Dream, which is a very conceptual map. It honestly feels like Fortress of Mystery, since there's not much going on with it. You crush some cyber demons, grab the 3 keys that are just laid out in plain sight, and call it a day. I know that some people find a lot of entertainment out of torturing a group of cyber demons, but I don't get much out of Bad Dream. So I saved the 2 best map designers for last, at least when it comes to the master levels. Dr. Sleep and Jim Flynn. Both of these guys have released tremendous Doom maps in their time. They also worked on other projects like Unreal and the Boom Sourceport respectively. Unfortunately, Dr. Sleep, real name John Anderson, and Jim Flynn have passed away, but their names will live on in the community. On a brighter note though, both of these guys created amazing master levels, and I'm eager to talk about them here. Dr. Sleep designed 5 maps that wound up in the master levels, with them all being a part of his Inferno series. Some of the traits that show up in each Dr. Sleep map are the small layouts and tight action pieces. These maps are pretty easy to blow through, and compared to the expansive, drawn-out maps in the master levels, they are so much more palatable and feel especially designed for pistol starts. I also like that you start out in a recognizable interior, located somewhere in the middle of a map, in levels like Virgil's Lead, Vesperus, Nessus, and Mino's Judgment. It feels like a home base of sorts, where you can stock up on ammo if you didn't take all of it, and it's almost as if it's like a place to breathe when demons are attacking you. With Vesperus, the starting area is where you also access the exit switch with the blue key, and you are shown that straight away with the blue outline here, which is a very clever touch from Dr. Sleep. Apart from a couple of sections, I don't think Dr. Sleep was out to confuse anyone with his maps, and they feel really fun to blast through. However, there are instances where I was stumped and had to look up a guide to finish the level. Going back to Vesperus again, there's a part where you need to grab the yellow key. So you scale a wall like Spider-Man and reach this little indent. I have no clue how people are supposed to figure that out, but when I discovered how to get there, I was annoyed but also amused. Dr. Sleep's master levels remind me so much of American McGee's maps in Doom 2, as they are also focused on quick bursts of action, as well as smaller and kinda symmetrical stage layouts. If you want to get into the master levels, I recommend starting off with Dr. Sleep's maps, and then graduate to Jim Flynn's work. I say this because Jim's 2 maps for this expansion, Titan Manor and Trapped on Titan, are fucking endurances, and will be tough and confusing for first-time players. That being said, Jim Flynn's work on the master levels is ingenious in my opinion, and especially in Titan Manor, it seems like no space is wasted in the map. Titan Manor is a giant puzzle at the end of the day, with combat encounters being secondary to the experience. But that's not to say that the monsters aren't a threat. As you're going through this manor, trying to figure out how to trigger platforms to lower, to flick switches, to hopefully grab the keys and solve the puzzle of this map, you have Mancubi and Arachnotron snipers gunning for you through the windows, and it's great. You have to secure a footing inside the manor by clearing out all the imps, shotgunners and chain gunners, and then my strategy is using all of my rockets on the Mancubi and Arachnotrons. That way you can focus on the puzzle in peace, but even still, getting all of the keys and uncovering areas is a task in and of itself, but it's amazingly done. Every mechanic in this level is so intricate, and while it's not as visceral as Cranium's Black Tower for example, the design of Titan Manor is still interesting enough to keep you engaged. The best part about this map is the experience of you unraveling how to get to certain parts, and since it's quite a small and focused map, the backtracking that you have to do doesn't get frustrating at all. People often compare Doom to a puzzle game, stating that it's a combat shooter puzzle for the player to solve. But Titan Manor is just a straight up riddle, and it's fantastic. As for Trapped on Titan, Jim Flynn's other map for the master levels, I enjoy this one too, and the layout is again like a giant riddle, but I just feel like Titan Manor looks nicer, is more polished, and more focused. One thing I do really like about Trapped on Titan is the brutal start, with chain gunners right there in your face, ready to fire, and you have barely anything to defend yourself. You get armor after you take care of the initial set of chain gunners, and while some people might call that unfair, and yeah, it kind of is, I love how Jim started off this map. Both of Jim's maps are fucking genius, and they are two of the highlights of this expansion, and those were the master levels for Doom 2. And for the most part, I enjoyed them a lot. There are a few maps that weren't entertaining, like Paradox, Garrison, and there were also a handful that were just fine, but holy fuck, I am impressed with how these hold up. Of course, you can't compare most of these master levels to the WODs produced by fans nowadays, there's just no comparison, but for 1995, these were incredible maps. Even now in the current age, I still thoroughly enjoyed Jim Flynn, Dr. Sleep, and Tim Willits' levels, and those guys were, in my opinion, the MVPs of this product. Having said that, all of the map designers involved have provided the Doom community with valuable content over the years, and they should all be respected. Moving on from the mid-90s, we now need to discuss my personal favourite Doom expansion, released 15 years after the master levels. When Doom 2 was ported to the Xbox Live Arcade by Nerve Software, they also developed a bonus expansion called No Rest for the Living. Rather than being a 32 map megawad like Hell on Earth, they instead wanted to pay homage to the original Doom and create a new 9-level episode. Doom 2's port on Xbox 360 is nothing special, and even lacks some of the key features from the PC version, like cheat codes or the medkit cross being replaced with a pill, but overall, the port gets the job done. The inclusion of No Rest for the Living was worth the price of admission alone back in 2010, as I believe that it's one of the best expansions for Doom ever. Due to the increased hardware of the Xbox 360, Nerve Software could put more enemies on screen at once and add much more detail in the environments. Map 1 starts the player out on Earth, and the thing I love about this level is that it's as hard as you want to make it. If you don't really explore or find secrets, then you will just battle the lower tier demons, which isn't much of an issue. However, as you open up the map and find more and more sections of it, then the level replies with stronger monsters like Revenants and Mancubi. I think this is an awesome concept, and this gives the player some choices with how to proceed. Do you want to get the super shotgun this early in the game? If so, you'll be attacked by the higher tier demons within the level. That is brilliant. Map 2, the Pain Labs, is more of the same as Map 1. You mostly slaughter demons in these earth-based corridors, and it's a perfectly solid level. One aspect of No Rest for the Living that I've got to praise is the consistency of the expansion, as there's almost no bad levels. The third map, titled Canyon of the Dead, opens up the environment a bit and makes the player traverse the outside terrain, which is littered with toxic waste streams and pools. Map 3 isn't obnoxious with its damaging flaws and doesn't force you to piggyback radiation suits or any bullshit like that. If you take a closer look at the level, you'll probably pick up on how the demonic architecture is slowly blending with Earth's environment, which is an awesome touch to see. Map 4 is where we truly notice Hell's effect on the planet, with lava cracks on the ground, the introduction of blood fountains, and even more hellish imagery. The idea of this level is that you're scaling up this mountain, while battling the hordes of demons on the top, and it's awesome. The gameplay feels so good throughout this whole expansion, and maps 1 to 4 don't disappoint. Map 4 actually takes you to the secret level if you're searching for it, and map 9, March of the Demons, is quite the stage. The idea is that the player is in this large arena with all of these types of enemies and a limited amount of ammo. Your objective is simple. Flick switches, survive each group of demons coming at you, and kill a cyber mastermind at the end. Unlike other maps with huge rooms to fight in, March of the Demons provides you with some cover which enhances the gameplay in my opinion. No Rest for the Living's secret map is nothing mind-blowing compared to Warren's or Go To It, but it's still a great map regardless. Map 5 is up next, and this is probably my least favourite level in the expansion, mostly because I suck at it. I'm a pretty average Doom player, but for some fucking reason I always tend to die on this map. I love this map's cramped design, where you need to conserve health pickups and ammo. I appreciate the increased difficulty, and I still think it's a solid map, but I enjoy this one the least out of the episode, and I'm not entirely sure why. That being said, if this is my least favourite level, then No Rest for the Living is a quality map set, and the designers should give themselves a pat on the back. Maps 6 and 7 are more hellish levels, and they are keeping with the whole Hell Mountain aesthetic, which I'm a fan of. In map 6, Inferno of Blood specifically, there is a pretty challenging Archvile encounter where he makes sure to resurrect the dead high tier enemies you've killed in this open space. Even though both of these maps are rather similar, they still offer some fun key collecting and demon encounters, especially when it comes to fighting revenants and cacodemons. The other monsters, like the Hell Knights, Barons, Imps and Pain Elementals, are there to distract you from taking out the revenants first, as they can fuck you up pretty easily if you're not careful. Now we're on to the final level of No Rest for the Living, and I've heard many fans complain that it's a lackluster conclusion to the expansion. I personally think it's fine. I mean, final maps are very difficult to create anyway, but map 8 does a good job to me. The gimmick around this level is that you're facing a cyber demon in a dark maze-like room, with your job being to lower all of the platforms to make the arena wider so it's easier for you to kill him. This is a cool concept, and while the maze room cyber demon thing has been done better in Sigil for example, and I'm sure other megawads, I still believe that map 8 is not this massive disappointment either. As a whole, No Rest for the Living is very fucking consistent with its level design, and there's not one terrible map in the set. If you're a crazy person that doesn't have the Xbox Live Arcade version of Doom 2 just lying about, then you can buy a Doom 3 BFG edition, and that comes with No Rest for the Living. I'd say pick it up. Speaking of Doom 3 and console ports, I want to now talk about Doom E1 M10 and Doom 2 Map 33. You might be asking, what the fuck am I actually talking about? Well, in the Doom 3 Collector's Edition for the original Xbox made by Vicarious Visions, they threw in Doom 1 and 2 as a bonus, and for even more of a bonus, they added 2 new levels to those games. I put quotations on the word new because the new maps tacked onto the Xbox Doom 1 and 2 ports aren't exactly brand new, In fact, at the time, they were 10 years old. The two exclusive Xbox maps in Doom 1 and 2 are called Sewers and Betray respectively, and they were made by Vicarious Visions employees back in the mid-90s. E1M10 Sewers was designed by David Calvin and David Blanchine in 1994, and can be accessed using a secret switch in Hangar. On the other hand, Map 33, Betray, was made in 1995 by Michael Bukowski, and is found in Underhalls. These maps are awful by today's standards, and even back in the 90s, both of them were still badly designed. Sewers is obviously set in a sewage system, and the map is just too big. The player can get lost very easily, the enemy placement is terrible, and the level is uglier than habitats. As for Betray, I would say that this map is probably worse than Sewers, due to the random Nazi soldiers scattered about, the rank design of the floor and the walls, and there's a possibility that you might get stuck if you go into this room without the yellow key. These maps were only included in the Xbox versions of Doom 1 and 2 as a little Easter egg for players to find, and that's it. It's almost as if the employees at Vicarious Visions wanted to put these amateur maps in as a joke or as a way to mark their territory, which is actually kinda cool. In the Doom 3 BFG edition, the switch that you hit to access map 33 in Doom 2 is still technically there, but instead of taking you to Betray, the game restarts map 2, Underhalls, which I find weird. On the general topic of expanding the initial Doom formula, id Software went on to release Doom RPG on mobile phones in 2005. This game was not just a port of classic Doom to phones and was actually its own thing. As the name suggests, Doom RPG retains the first-person action from the Doom series, but with a turn-based approach. You still shoot demons and pick up items, but you now also earn experience points and gain stat boosts, like your typical RPG. There's more of an emphasis on story and expository dialogue in Doom RPG, which is actually pretty similar to how Doom 3 was structured. Now, I have not played this game personally, but for a 2005 mobile game, Doom RPG looks quite good. I mean, it even features unique boss fights and new melee weapons that haven't actually appeared in any other Doom games, which is interesting to see. You know how Doom Eternal was praised for including the Unmaker, a gun which only appeared before in Doom 64? Yeah, well, I want the axe from Doom RPG to come back in a future Doom game. Apparently, id thought there was something to this game and went off to make a Doom 2 RPG in 2009. This time around, there are more playable characters, an expanded set of weapons, and a few new exclusive demons to battle. Apart from those additions, Doom 2 RPG seems to follow the same formula as the first game, but with the advent of Angry Birds and Candy Crush around this time, I would imagine that nobody paid too much attention to the sequel. Looking back at the expansions for Doom makes me think a lot about the community's impact on the franchise. The master levels, No Rest for the Living, the Xbox exclusive maps, even Final Doom if you want to count it as an expansion, were all made by die-hard fans of the series. The fact that id Software has engaged so much with Doom's community to the point where they took fans in to make official expansions is awesome, and they've been doing it for a long time. There are game companies now, like Sega, that give their fans the opportunity to work on projects like Sonic Mania, but id Software are the kings of that fan-driven approach. This all makes me think about how Doom, or really any franchise, has survived for so many years, and while it's partly due to the game's brilliant design and mechanics, the game's legacy also has to do with the long-standing community. Even to this day, id Software hasn't altered their mentality of putting fans first, especially with people like Hugo Martin and Marty Stratton running the shop. While these expansions for Doom 1 and 2 vary in quality, I'm still glad that they were made in the first place. Without the master levels, Tim Willits might have not been hired by id Software. Without sewers or Betray, a few employees at Vicarious Visions might not have continued their gaming career and would have chosen a different path in life. As for No Rest for the Living, besides being my favourite Doom expansion, it was also made to be this massive homage to the episodic structure of the original game. Similar to Final Doom, every expansion made was born out of passion for classic Doom, which is something that is carried to this very day. Doom is a massive property in the gaming world, with many entries spanning over 30 years, released on various platforms. So far we have covered all of the official classic Doom titles available on PC, but there's a subdivision of commercial Doom products that were never published by id Software. I touched on these games a bit when talking about the many Doom 2 expansions, but I honestly feel like they deserve their own video. Nobody really talks about these games and they've been lost to time. The lost episodes of Doom, Perdition's Gate, and How to Pay. These are the unofficial commercial Doom games. As I mentioned in the last part of this Doom retrospective, there were a couple of companies in the mid-90s that sold commercial Doom mods and WOD packs in stores. This is obviously illegal and shouldn't be done nowadays. Like, could you imagine somebody trying to sell a modded copy of GTA 5, for example? Anyway, the most notable of these companies was WizardWorks, who published Perdition's Gate and How to Pay, which were megawads / partial conversions for Doom 2. I say partially because they did add some textures and change some enemy designs, but for the most part, these two were just glorified level packs. I would include Hacks, Twitch and Kill in this video, but that is a total conversion of Doom and it's more like a standalone game only using the Doom engine. Hacks is more akin to games like Hexen, Heretic and Strife to name a few, which all use the Doom engine to make an original product, rather than simply being a Doom 2 megawad. WizardWorks were the ones that published Perdition's Gate and How to Pay, but these megawads were actually designed by Wraith Corporation, a team of map makers that consisted primarily of Team TNT members, the most famous of which being Tom Mustaine. Tom went on to design maps for TNT Evolution and the master levels, and originally Perdition's Gate was intended to be tacked on to Final Doom, but the window of opportunity closed for that. Then WizardWorks snatched up the project and released it alongside How to Pay, in which they are considered brother and sister games. Tom initially worked on Perdition's Gate with his father, and you can download the whole megawad on his site if you're interested. After WizardWorks released How to Pay and Perdition's Gate, they went on to publish the Duke Nukem 3D expansions, Duke It Out in DC, Duke Caribbean, and Duke Nuclear Winter, developed by Sunstorm Interactive and Simply Silly Software respectively. WizardWorks were eventually acquired by GT Interactive. Of course, GT Interactive would wind up being bought out by Infogrames, and the rest is history. It's very weird to think that WizardWorks would play a part in creating authorized add-ons for Duke 3D after they released unofficial Doom megawads and compilations. Oh yeah, forgot to mention that back in the day, WizardWorks also released several Doom mod compilation discs that would include like 1,000 levels ripped straight from the internet, most of which were absolutely shit. WizardWorks' D-Zone compilation series was the catalyst for id Software tacking on Maximum Doom with the master levels, but that was covered in my previous video. The bottom line is that both D-Zone and Maximum Doom suck, and are filled with garbage WOD files. Going back before the release of Perdition's Gate and How to Pay, there was another Doom WOD commercially available without the support from id Software, called The Lost Episodes of Doom. Along with video games and feature films, there have also been comic books and novels made based off of the Doom property. In 1995, there existed a publishing company called Cybex that went on and released the Lost Episodes of Doom book, written by Jonathan Mendoza, and it was unofficially packaged with a 24-level Doom mod file of the same name. id Software had nothing to do with this project, and the book essentially acted as a strategy guide for the WOD. It also functioned as an instruction manual for Doom, giving you the basic information on the weapons, the items, and on how to install the game. The WOD's maps were designed by Christian Klei of Master Levels fame, as well as Bob Carter. Something I really like about the Lost Episodes book is that it provides the reader with actual maps of each level and some insight on what Christian and Bob were thinking when making these levels. So I know that was a massive history dump about unofficial Doom products, but how do they actually play nowadays? Is there something of value in the Lost Episodes of Doom, Perdition's Gate, and Hell to Pay? Or are these just relics of the past that should be left alone? I believe starting with the Lost Episodes of Doom makes the most sense, considering the WOD and the book were released first. Aside from the questionable release tactic, the WOD itself is nothing special, and it reeks of mid-90s quality. Most of the maps aren't terrible, and I've definitely seen worse, but at the same time, the Lost Episodes of Doom is not worth playing. There are 3 episodes to choose from in this WOD: Massacre on Callisto, The Killing Fields of Io, and Hell's Gate, The Red Spots. Each of these episodes are based on one of Jupiter's moons, and they don't feature any secret levels surprisingly. There's just 8 levels per episode, totaling up to 24. Though I said before that the Lost Episodes of Doom is nothing to write home about, E1M1 is at least a good starting level. The only annoying thing about this map is the 2 lost souls that just seem thrown in for no reason, but regardless, E1M1 is pretty well designed, and I like the variety on display. There's a little maze section when locating the blue key, there's an outside area with rather narrow ledges, there's some demonic architecture in this secret, and this all makes for a solid map. Episode 1 is probably the most consistent set of this entire WOD, but that still doesn't make it great. E1M2 opens up the environment a little, and it's fine. I don't mind this one, but the level is kinda generic. You get the plasma rifle in this map, and while I find it weird that it would be hiding in the second level of the very first episode, it will help out later on. E1M3 is where the Lost Episodes of Doom takes a nosedive and becomes less than stellar. For one thing, you have to press on this computer to open up the door in order to progress, and that kinda sucks. Oh, and after that, you have to run across this long toxic waste corridor, but at least they make up for it with a soul sphere. Then you have to hop along these platforms that go down, and yeah, this just isn't fun to me. Moving on to E1M4, and this level is fucking bullshit for one specific reason. So you go through this door and you wind up in this large room here. They give you an invincibility power-up, which is basically a distraction. Your natural reaction is to get the invincibility and drop down, which is where you will encounter 6 fucking cyber demons and you're trapped. There's no way to get out of this pit, and when the invincibility runs out, you're fucked. There's nothing you can do but die from the damaging floor that's down there. What you're supposed to do is turn around from the platform where you dropped from, flick this switch, and that raises a bridge for you to grab the yellow key. The rest of the maps in episode 1 though are fairly mediocre. E1M5 is teleporter heavy and gives me Unholy Cathedral vibes. E1M6 is alright, but a bit dickish with the narrow toxic waste tunnels, and then E1M7 would be fine if the level ended after you defeat the Spider Mastermind, but no, you have to flick 10 million fucking switches first. As Christian Klei points out in the Lost Episodes of Doom book, E1M8 was the only level in the set that was directly based on a map from the original Doom. Both E1M8 from Doom 1 and the Lost Episodes of Doom feature a pentagram shape and a teleporter that sends you to a room where you die immediately. With the latter though, there is no fight with the Barons of Hell, probably because you fought a Spider Mastermind in the previous map. Let's carry on with episode 2's starting level, and to be honest, there's not much to talk about with this one. It's a decent enough map, and the only thing to really note is the awesome combination of the blood red sky and the brown building you are fighting through. E2M2 begins with a room full of boxes, and it looks a bit unappealing. The rest of the level is fine though, except for the annoying teleport puzzle. Episode 2 is the low points of the lost episodes of Doom, not because the maps are horrendous or anything like that, but because there's nothing to say about them. I will mention though that E2M4 is probably one of the best levels in the entire WoD, due to the small details they added in. The map takes place in a weapons testing facility, and it reminds me a lot of TNT Evolution's lunar mining project with its attention to detail. The level is packed with sleeping quarters, a fully kitted out bathroom area, and it even includes some hellish textures as well for added variety. We've reached the final stretch of the WoD with episode 3, and this is no doubt the worst set of maps in the game. Every level in this episode is so fucking big, and it's not packed with anything interesting. The maps just have bland open areas with barely any demons to fight, and it becomes really tedious to get from point A to point B. It almost feels like the map designers gave up and just thought they should pad out these levels with lackluster areas to explore. I mean, look at E3M1. Does this seem fun to go through? No, it's pitch black, and I feel like I solved the level's puzzle by accident. I guess that's why there's a strategy guide for this game, but real Doom guys don't need instructions. On top of each map's unnecessary size and boring combats, there's also a handful of mandatory secrets that hold keys in this episode, and that's one of the most infuriating things you can do. The only saving grace of this episode is E3M8, where it pulls a Warrens and remixes the first level of the WoD. I'm always a fan of that kind of stuff, and it really works here, with the pits in E1M1 being the location of the final boss. The lost episodes of Doom was an interesting product at the time, since they basically got away with selling a Doom mod in stores by tacking on a book. Cybex actually approached Christian and Bob first about using their levels for a retail release. I like the fact that Christian and Bob did contribute to the book by writing the drafts of the level guides, with Jonathan Mendoza polishing it up. As for the lost episode maps on their own, like I said, they're nothing special and don't really hold up to today's WoDs, but there are some highlights here and there. I especially like E1M1, E2M4, and E3M8. I think they're awesome and can hold their own. After the lost episodes of Doom was done and over with, Christian Klei got a job at LucasArts, and according to this interview, he hasn't created a Doom map since 1995. So this is me from the future speaking. If you want to play a WoD that captures the spirit of the original Doom, play Doom the way it did. It is extremely well designed, and the people involved should get a round of applause. Now let's talk about the two unofficial Doom Mega WoDs produced by WizardWorks Software, Hell to Pay and Perdition's Gates. Both of these games feature new texture work and new music, but Hell to Pay also packs in swapped enemy and weapon sprites on top of custom intermission screens to tell its story. While yes, having new enemy designs is a nice addition, they kinda half-assed it because only a couple of them are changed. The Pinkies are now robots, and they make a much less satisfying sound when killed. The Mancubi are now these fucking blobs that I can't even make out what they actually are supposed to be, and the Imps probably have the only good redesign in the game. They look similar to regular Imps, but they're updated a bit, and it's awesome to see. The brand new textures in Hell to Pay range from pretty cool to something you'd see in MS Paint. Take the first level as an example. There's a section where rockets are shooting into the sky, and just look at them. How is this the best they can do when their updated Imp, for instance, looks way more detailed? Regardless of the game's graphics and textures, Hell to Pay's level design is not great in my opinion. Every level that I've played at least feels like an adventure with quite a bit of backtracking to find keys and open doors. Now this is standard Doom fare, and I don't mind these type of levels obviously, but when the same idea is done over and over and over, it gets really tedious really fast, and it makes the frustrating levels even more frustrating due to their long length. I only played up to map 10 because I had enough of these same adventure map layouts, and I feel like you need some palette cleansers here and there. I mean, look at a megawad like TNT Evolution. Sure, it has plenty of large maps with plenty to discover, but the game also has levels like Lunar Mining Project or Wormhole to break up the gameplay a bit. This is my main issue with Hell to Pay, and even though the levels might be amazing later on, they didn't need to make every map I've played so far into this stretched out explorathon. The actual level designs aren't awful or anything, and if you like these long-winded maps, then you'll get a ton of enjoyment from Hell to Pay. I personally think these types of levels start to drag when there's one after another, but that's just me. I know people love the adventure maps, and so do I, but nothing has grabbed me so far, and that's a shame. Maybe I'll come back someday to Hell to Pay and give it another shot. But I wasn't exactly eager to play more. And that's coming from someone who loves to play maps like Odyssey of Noises and Mount Erebus. Hell to Pay isn't terrible by any stretch, but it wasn't for me. I do respect the efforts on making all of the new textures, music, and the storyline that Hell to Pay follows though. Yeah, I've barely mentioned that Perdition's Gates and Hell to Pay actually have plots that are brought up before and after every level. I don't actually know whether each story is good or anything, mostly because I didn't pay attention to the intermission screens, but if you're into that sort of thing, then both of these megawads deliver. If Perdition's Gates was released as a part of Final Doom as it was originally intended to, then it would have been the second best megawad of the bunch. Without a shadow of a doubt, I think that Perdition's Gate is better than TNT Evolution, and while it doesn't reach Plutonia quality, there is a ton of Plutonia's DNA inside this wad. Although Hell to Pay focuses on drawn-out, open adventure map design, Perdition's Gate does the exact opposite and mostly features levels that are short, to the point, and sometimes quite punishing. I wasn't compelled to continue playing Hell to Pay and stopped at map 10, and I was initially going to be fair and only play up to map 10 for Perdition's Gate, but I got addicted and ended up beating the wad. You can blow through this game in an evening or two if you get the hang of it, and I highly recommend doing so. Perdition's Gate is really fucking good, and some highlights include map 7, map 8, map 15, map 17, map 21, and map 29. I love the way map 7 and map 8 connect as they are both set in a sewage system, and the transition between the two levels is almost seamless. As for map 15, there is a part where you need to teleport to this pocket universe of sorts, and it has a very interesting look. Map 17 and Map 21 are excellent little challenge maps that have some great combat encounters and set pieces. Oh, and then Map 29 feels like the perfect endgame stage as it throws everything at you. And if you've never played Perdition's Gate, then you are missing out, and if you love Plutonia, then I can't recommend this wad enough. My only real complaint is with the disappointing secret maps, since apart from this white texture gimmick, there's nothing really to note with them. Also, why is the final screen so fucking goofy looking? If this is what the Doom Marine actually looks like, then humanity is doomed. Just wave the white flag at the demons already. Apart from that end card, the new textures on display are not too distracting, and I got used to them after a while. I mean, how can I judge these new textures when I used to love those shitty Doom high resolution packs as a kid? Yeah, I actually thought this looked nicer than the 2D sprites that came in the base game. Perdition's Gate also has excellent music and rivals some of TNT Evolution's tracks. The point is that there's a lot to like with this wad, and while most of the level design is challenging and meant to test your skills, at the same time it's balanced due to each level's length. You're not spending ages searching for keycards in Perdition's Gates, and in that respect, it really feels like a spiritual successor to Plutonia. You can find this entire WOD for free on Tom Marstein's website, so go play it. And this has been the unofficial commercial Doom games, and even though their releases are questionable, they are still fascinating pieces of Doom history. Oh, and how can I forget Chex Quest? I've gotta say, out of all of these commercially released Doom games, Chex Quest is fucking awesome and has grown a cult following over the years. There's even Chex Quest 2 and 3, plus an HD remake on Steam, and that's all great to see. The goofy tone of Chex Quest games is so entertaining, and its distribution through Chex cereal boxes was genius. Alright, now the video's over. Next time, Doom 64. Doom 64 might be the most divisive Doom game ever made, of course next to Doom 3. Instead of being just a port of the original Doom but for the Nintendo 64, Doom 64 was an entirely new beast. The game has over 30 newly designed levels, and it even gives the player an exclusive weapon that hasn't shown up until Doom Eternal, the Unmaker. id Software took on a more supervisory role, and it was Midway who actually developed the game. Doom 64 is like if you take Doom 1 and 2 and turn them into something that Tim Burton would make. The game's presentation is very gothic, the enemies are redesigned to be more scary, and Doom 64 also features a lot of fluorescent lighting. While the monsters can be challenging to the player, especially in later levels, the real enemy in Doom 64 is the new environmental dangers and scripting that the game adds. Doom has had crushing ceilings and things like that before, but Doom 64 ramps this up, and the level of environment interaction feels like a character in of itself. Regardless, Doom 64 was released in 1997, and it's an interesting game for sure. I know that many fans either fucking adore Doom 64, or find it too dark and too atmospheric to get into. I personally like the game for what it is, a different take on the classic Doom formula. When I think of Doom 64, I usually consider the game as a perfect middle ground from classic Doom to Doom 3. I mean, you have the typical run and gun gameplay of classic Doom, but Doom 64 also features dark interiors and spooky lighting, which sounds very similar to Doom 3. For many years, Doom 64 was like the TurboGrafx 16 of the Doom franchise. While Doom 1 and 2 got all the spotlight and attention, Doom 64 was chilling in the background, and nowadays, most people seem to have come around to it. In fact, this game has been rejuvenated by Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, probably due to the game's creative director, Hugo Martin, being a huge fan of Doom 64. Doom Eternal has the Unmaker, and Doom 64's re-release was even a pre-order bonus, and when you finish the Doom 64 Lost levels, there is a reference to Doom 2016 within the end screen text. With that said, I want to discuss the gameplay of Doom 64 and how it can be compared to Doom 1 and 2, as well as how Doom 64 has been revisited by Night Dive and the new id Software team. This is the lasting impact of Doom 64. The first level in Doom 64 sums up everything about the game. There's an emphasis on colourful lighting, and that's immediately clear when you look at these blue cages. Doom 64 is a lot darker and focuses on environmental gameplay elements, and that's also seen throughout the first map. The named staging area is pretty perfect in this case, and it's a wonderful level to start out the game with. Other aspects of Doom 64 to note so far include the Pinky Demons appearing to be a lot more threatening compared to Doom 1 and 2, the chainsaw has 2 blades on it, and there is more of a puzzle element this time around. Key collecting is huge in Doom 64, and in the second level, all 3 keys need to be grabbed in order to progress. Before we move on to map 2, let's talk about the weapons some more. As you can see, both of the shotguns don't have the full animation to them, and they just have this little pump when they reload. This doesn't bother me, and apart from that quirk, both shotguns are awesome in Doom 64. They make a great sound, and that goes for most of the other weapons in the game. The chain gun is fucking sick and has a blue flame effect when firing. The rocket launcher is basically the same as Doom on PC, but has an updated look and sound. The plasma rifle has a cool light that emits from it when shot, and the BFG is just the big fucking gun. Enough said. We'll get to talking about the Unmaker later on, because getting that weapon is a bit more of an involved process. Map 2, the Terraformer, is the make or break level for Doom 64. This is where you're either locked in for the ride, or you get frustrated and turn the game off. In the level, you're greeted by this pitch black hallway, with the only bit of navigational help being from these red squares. The player will eventually find their way to the switch where the blue lights are turned on, and I personally love this aspect about Doom 64. The way that you need to activate the light sources is very creative. Speaking of cool gameplay moments, there's a part in map 2 where you are able to grab the chain gun, but then a bunch of pinkies come after you. If you just keep firing, you'll kill them all soon enough, but it might seem pretty intimidating for first time players. So you're progressing along the level, and then you get up to this part with the collapsing ceiling blocks. This specific section is where you might get frustrated, and yeah, getting crushed is annoying, but as you can see, they tell you where to stand, and it's not that hard the second time around. Also, how can I discuss map 2 without mentioning the disappearing blue key puzzle that they pull off? This is great, and it feels like the developers are fucking with you, which to me is the most memorable aspect about Doom 64. The experimental puzzle design and the more creative environmental dangers / tricks is why Doom 64 stands out among the rest of the classic Doom series. This is exemplified with the part in map 2 where the pillars repeatedly smash the ground, opening up a new path to explore through. Doom 64 reminds me of Duke Nukem 3D in this regard, with the environmental set pieces. Map 3 gives us a better look at the Nightmare Imp, a more powerful variant on the classic imp that we all know. He shoots purple fireballs, and they kinda have the same graphical properties as the Spectre. They're both translucent, and they're a nice addition, I guess. The third map also introduces the Cacodemon, which looks fucking badass with the chains around his arms, the glowing yellow eyeball, and his darker aesthetic. He acts more or less the same as the Cacodemon on PC, but he just has more of a gothic appearance. The same goes for the Lost Soul, who again is introduced in map 3. The next level, titled Holding Area, shows more of the UAC facility, and it's pretty good. Map 4 leads to the first secret level, with the super secret level being accessible in map 1, and I don't have much to say on Hectic other than it's a pain in the arse. At least it has that cool third person zoom out shot of Doom Guy getting blown up, which has never been done before in a Doom game up to that point. Anyway, the first secret level, Outpost Omega, which is an awesome name, has a lot of verticality to it, and it also holds one of the demon keys and the Unmaker weapon. So this weapon is basically a laser gun, and I think it's an excellent addition. The Unmaker can be powered up by obtaining each of the 3 demon keys scattered across the 3 secret levels in the game. The demon keys have a secondary function that's only noticeable when you reach the final boss, and I think it's an incredible touch. There have been useful items before in classic Doom, but this game rewards the player for exploring each of the secret levels and adds a practical reason for reaching them, as well as grabbing the demon keys. This gives Doom 64 more replay value as a result, and I like the idea of finding these 3 artifacts that actually give you a practical benefit during the final boss encounter. Exploring in classic Doom will reward you with weapons, ammo, and armor, but the world doesn't react differently, unlike how the demon keys work. The Unmaker and the demon keys aside, Outpost Omega is just a short fun challenge map with some great height to it. The following few normal maps in Doom 64 are all set in the UAC facility, and they are probably the low point in the game. They're fine, but they tend to feel a bit generic after a while. However, after map 8, Doom 64 takes place entirely in Hell. That is such a nice break from classic Doom on PC, and this sets Doom 64 apart from the rest. The first Hell level in the game is a Dead Simple clone, which is always a perfect place to start. After clearing out all of the Mancubi and Pain Elementals, both of which have excellent redesigns, we move on to map 10, The Bleeding. This level is simply designed, with only a couple of castle buildings and an underground water tunnel system, and it just works. Hell so far in Doom 64 isn't all fire and brimstone, but instead these early levels are gothic and Tim Burton-esque. It all reminds me of a Hammer film in that regard. Map 11 is more about exploring and key collecting than actual combat encounters, but there are moments where things get tricky. Case in point, the part where you need to open the red door and there's a group of barons and hell knights on the other side ready to blast you at point blank range. I love the aesthetic of these castle levels, and map 12, Altar of Pain, also known as my all-time favourite map in the game, blends the more traditional look of Doom's Hell and the gothic citadels together. This map has the candles on the grounds lighting your way, the sea of blood, the more blatant demonic imagery, along with the medieval buildings, and it's fantastic. Doom has almost never looked so visceral before. Doom 64 really shines when we get into these hell stages, and the map designs, like the layouts of the enemies, keys and everything, are also well done. The updated lighting for this game feels like it's shown off more in these levels, and I love how colourful Doom 64 can be, even with the ambient music and the moody atmosphere it's trying to pull off. Not counting Hectic, map 12 contains the exit to the second secret level of the game, called The Lair. This one is pretty good and to the point. I like the little puzzle the player needs to do in order to grab the second demon key, with how you have to shoot a group of well-hidden switches in the time limits. Good stuff. Map 13, Dark Citadel, reminds me of a freakier version of Abattoir from Plutonia, with all of the meat hooks and wooden pillars about the place. This level is a little too barren for my tastes. There's a few too many lackluster rooms, but it's not a terrible map. Map 14, Eye of the Storm, is another solid castle level, and yeah, you'll see a few more of these maps over the game's campaign. I find the Dark Fortress surrounded by water design interesting, and it's typically what I think of when I hear Doom 64, but there might be a bit too many of these levels. Still, Eye of the Storm is pretty damn good, and the following level, Map 15, Dark Entries, has some pretty decent set pieces and puzzle elements. The section with the Arachnotron that shoot 2 rows of projectiles simultaneously rather than just one, by the way, while you're trying to do a key puzzle is frustrating in a good way, and I also like the fireballs shooting from these stone-faced tablets in this dark open room. It's a pretty difficult level, probably one of the hardest yet in Doom 64, and most of that falls on the Arachnotrons. Map 16, Blood Keep, is up next, and I can do without this level. I mean, it's fine, and I like the Nosferatu coffin wall textures and the fluorescent blue cave, but it is one of the more forgettable levels. Map 17, Watch Your Step. This is a straightforward level, with waves of enemies spawning in until you eventually face off against the Cyber Demon. They give you plenty of ammo to take him down within this level alone, so if you're playing from a pistol start, you should still have no trouble with it. Map 17 is pure fun. It feels like an expanded version of Dead Simple, and has some simple yet effective texture work. The final stretch of Doom 64 might be the best section in the game, where it throws everything at you. Unlike, let's say, all of the classic Doom games, Doom 64 ends on a pretty strong note. Map 18, Spawned Fear, is another great looking hell level and has a bit of everything. Buildings ripped straight from a Hammer film, this green waste room that actually foreshadows the later parts of the level where you need to use the hazmat suit. There is a circular shaped room that screams occult and houses a group of pain elementals, and there's a little courtyard area outside of where the main buildings are. Map 18 also contains contains an exit to the final secret level of the game, and it's fairly easy to get to. All you do is go through the yellow key door, trigger a teleporter in the parallel room, and that's it. In the Void is the name of the third secret map, and it tries to be more abstract than the previous ones. Instead of hitting a switch or going through an exit teleporter, the player needs to jump off the Void to end the level, which is actually kinda cool. This might be one of the most interesting Doom 64 maps, since it attempts something completely new with its design, and we haven't really seen it before in Doom yet. Map 19, The Spiral, is extremely short, but it's another well done level. It honestly feels like this map was designed by Sandy Peterson and should be placed in Doom 2, as it's a fairly simple gimmick with the player going up a huge spiral staircase with enemies shooting them at all angles. It's fairly easy once you get the hang of it, and Map 19 is a perfect palette cleanser from the more exploratory maps. It's excellent. Map 20, Breakdown, starts out with an assault of hit scanners and imps, firing from the ground and up top respectively. The design of this beginning room reminds me of Pharaoh from TNT Evolution, and I really like it. You shoot the switch from up here to lower the blue key, similar to Valere. Nevertheless, Breakdown is a very good map and has some amazing looking rooms. The same goes for Map 21, Pitfalls, which is rather tricky to maneuver through at first due to the platforming in this rocky area, but this is a wonderful level. Map 21 feels expansive without feeling overly convoluted, and it's my second favourite map in the game. This is without a doubt one of the highlights of Doom 64, along with each of the following maps until the very end. Map 22, Burnt Offerings, Map 23, Unholy Temple, and Map 24, No Escape are all solid in their own rights. Even though Map 12, Altar of Pain, is hands down the best map in Doom 64 and my personal favourites, I'd say that the game's ending third is the most well designed and memorable. Map 22, Burnt Offerings, is connected by this courtyard arena, and this map is rather heavy on the Arachnotrons, which I don't mind. This is the endgame after all, so I expect it to throw the more difficult enemies at me. Map 23, Unholy Temple, is one of the most intricate levels, with some of the most elaborate environmental elements. You have to collect the yellow, blue, and red keys like normal, but you also have to figure out this unique key switch puzzle to unlock the path to get out of there. This level has some dickish traps, like the two crushing slabs in the blue key door. Oh, and there's also the section where if you get the switch code wrong, a Hell Knight will spawn out of nowhere. Overall, Map 23 is an excellent stage, and it's one of the best looking maps that Doom 64 has to offer. As for Map 24, No Escape, it's good, but there's not too much to comment on as it's merely a Cyber Demon boss fight before the endgame. I kinda wish that Unholy Temple was the penultimate map of the game, since it acts like the perfect penultimate challenge right before the end boss encounter. The final map of Doom 64 is either piss easy or fairly difficult depending on whether you grabbed the demon keys. Besides upgrading the Unmaker, you can additionally use the demon keys to activate these switches in the final map to lock the demons from spawning in. This makes it so much easier to kill the Mother Demon, a new boss monster designed specifically for Doom 64. Go ahead and just kill it with a few blasts of a BFG or Unmaker and you've completed the game. If you finished the super secret level, Hectic, which I would only recommend after you've beaten the game already, you can unlock the bonus fun levels from the menu screen, along with being able to select any other stage you want. The fun maps in Doom 64 are just small challenges that can all be completed in like 20 minutes. They're fine, there's nothing wrong with them, but at the same time, there's nothing important to note. Doom 64 is considered the forgotten game in the Doom series, mostly due to how everyone thought that it was only a Doom port for the Nintendo 64. Besides that misimpression, information, people have had a mixed reaction to it due to the gloomy tone it sets, along with the hazardous environmental scripting. The more and more I play Doom 64, the more I love it, and when all of its pieces fall into place, the gothic architecture, the eerie music, the more menacing enemy designs, the game becomes truly special. Yes, there's a couple of criticisms you can throw at the game, like the increased amount of backtracking per level, or how a couple of maps can feel samey, but for the most part, Doom 64 is one of the better games in the series. The dark, cultish atmosphere is so effective, partly due to most of their campaign being set in hell, and also the overall level design and gameplay feels polished too. Over the years, Doom 64 has gotten reassessed and found a new audience, with id Software embracing the game in newer Doom material, and with them remastering it for current consoles and PC. I'm glad that we have had a resurgence of this game, since it does a lot right, and like I said early on in the video, it's a solid balance between the fast-paced action from classic Doom and the type of mood that's set in Doom 3. I hope that it continues to reference Doom 64 in their new Doom titles, and I want them to even take Plutonia and TNT into account, like maybe throw in some final Doom Easter eggs or something in the Fortress of Doom. Doom 64 is not any better or worse in my opinion than any other classic Doom game, and it stands on the shoulders of giants, even to this day. The game is no doubt a different spin or take on the classic Doom series, but it's still Doom at the end of the day. Speaking about the new 2020 re-release, there was a new episode released with it, titled The Lost Levels. Now, I have no idea why this newly designed expansion pack created by Kaiser from Night Dive is dubbed the Lost Levels, since there's nothing lost about them. From my understanding, each of the maps were designed for the re-release, so that doesn't make any sense. Why not call it Doom 64 The Slayer Levels or something like that? This map pack is supposed to bridge the gap between Doom 64 and Doom 2016 after all, which it only does using a loose connection within the NTech scroll, but the name would be at least more fitting than The Lost Levels. Being a pedantic fuck about expansion pack titles aside, Doom 64 The Lost Levels is a very consistent map set. Although there are only 6 levels in the campaign on top of one new fun map, each of them are quite dense and will take you a bit to finish them. The expansion starts out with Plant Ops, which is your fairly run-of-the-mill UAC base map. It's a good way to kick things off and features toxic waste pools, which is something you wouldn't find too often in regular Doom 64. Evil Sacrifice is next, and it's a standard Intro to Hell level. While it is a solid level, it is probably the weakest regular map of the set. Cold Grounds and Wretched Vats of the following levels, and these are my two favourites in the Lost Levels. I can't get enough of the water-covered fortress from Cold Grounds, and Wretched Vats is essentially set in a hellish prison, complete with hit scanners in cages. Thy Glory is the penultimate map in the Lost Levels, and it certainly acts like it. Backtracking is constant in this one, and it feels like a quest trying to find just one key. It's pretty good though, and the map's design reminds me a ton of Neurosphere from Plutonia for some reason. So, I said that Evil Sacrifice is probably the weakest regular level in the expansion, and that's because the boss map, Final Judgment, is the worst overall in the set. It's just a standard boss fight, but the annoying part is that you have to pick up each demon key one by one to spawn in the Sister Resurrector, as they're calling it, even though the boss is basically the Mother Demon 2.0, and by collecting all of the demon keys, the Unmaker is fully powered up, so go ahead and use that to destroy it. Nevertheless, The Lost Levels is a great little expansion for Doom 64, and it's so refreshing to see this game get some support. It's crazy to think about the journey that Doom 64 went on, with it being initially discarded as a port. Then it was given a closer look by fans and has grown a strong cult following, to finally the game being officially re-released and it given the proper attention it deserves by id Software themselves. I have to credit Hugo Martin and Marty Stratton for making that happen, with Hugo explicitly saying that it's probably his favourite Doom game. Doom 64 covered a ton of ground, even back in 1997. Besides PlayStation Doom, this was the franchise's first proper taste into the more eerie and gothic sides of Doom, and I hold it in high regard as one of the most unique entries in the series. And this has been the lasting impact of Doom 64.